Beijing tomorrow. I can't remember the name of the town that we're going to, but it's about 2 hours on the train.
I heard you were going to Shanxi Datong, right?
Possibly. Yes.
Okay.
And then we're there for about 3 days. And then I'm going to Shanghai. Okay. And then I've got a little film shoot in Thailand on the way home. Oh. And then should get home for Christmas. Okay. See the family in Costa Rica.
Okay. I heard that as soon as you arrived in Beijing, you went and bought yourself a pair of long johns.
It's cold. I live in the jungle where it's sweaty all the time and and hot. And it's cold. I wasn't expecting it.
So you have them on right now?
No, I haven't got them on now. I wish I had those. It's cold in here.
Okay. Long johns, a pair of long johns, 秋裤, are absolutely essential to people who live in Beijing.
秋裤.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems to me that now your career sort of based or focused in China, right?
It's not so much that it's focused in China, but it has, a little bit more than it was in the past. Yeah, it's the honest truth is that the world of television is struggling at the moment. And some countries are struggling less than other countries, and China's doing pretty well. And so I think, if I'm very honest, my career could have ended, certainly on television, about 5 years ago. But China was still commissioning, and I was lucky enough to have a supportive team within the Discovery Group who were part of the Chinese Discovery Group. And then latterly this relationship with Bilibili as well. And so thanks to China, my career is still going. And the programs still get transmitted all around the world. And nobody back home knows there's any different, but it's only because of China that I'm still doing this stuff. So.
You have a very large following in China.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? I never really understand why it is, but I just get flattered every time I come to China. Everyone says such lovely things.
Yeah. And actually, along the way, UK has produced many, many very great TV shows. The Weakest Link. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do, with Anne Diamond, yeah.
Actually, I did one episode of the Chinese version of The Weakest Link,
As the host?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. But only 1 or 2 episodes.
Did you have to be really stern?
Yes. And I had to do sort of wink my eyes, and that I could never do,
That's a great program.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've sort of become a little bit of an Ed Stafford expert these days. I watch a lot of your shows.
Apologies.
And your TED Talk.
Oh, right, okay. That was a while ago.
Some of the interviews you did along the way. And actually, I wrote down a little bit of note I'd like to share with you because I'm really interested. Just a little bit something. Okay. Some of the things you ate along the way, okay? And you ate rotting meat, carrion filled with maggots, giant centipedes, tarantulas, snakes, sometimes half-spoiled, wild boar flesh that had begun to decay, fish that smell sour. Well, that's nothing. Monkey meat provided by local villagers in the jungle. Yeah. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to eat any of those. Never, ever. Okay? But I really like to know how they taste. So describe to me in details the flavor, the texture of those things I just mentioned.
I think the first thing I would say is that everyone thinks, oh my God, it must be so disgusting having to eat all these horrible things. But the truth is I'm always so hungry when I'm in that position that actually they normally taste good. And certainly for TV, sometimes I'm almost acting a sort of, when actually it's just food. It's just calories. And I'm not, my wife will tell you that I'm not very fussy as an eater. I eat pretty much anything. And like the concept of, I don't know, pulling the legs off a grasshopper and putting it in my mouth, I'm not bothered about that sort of stuff at all.
Do you have to close your eyes or not look at them?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, so it didn't bother you at all?
It doesn't bother me in the slightest, no. But China is renowned, much more so than my country, for eating more, for example, of more of the animals. So like you'll eat lots of the intestines and stuff like that, whereas although our
you British people do the same. Haggis.
We did back in the day, but nobody eats haggis.
Really?
Tourists eat haggis. Nobody eats haggis anymore. I mean, very, very few hardcore Scottish people, maybe. But my grandmother would have eaten tripe but my parents' generation didn't, and certainly our generation didn't, and the modern kids would run a mile from it. So I genuinely am surprised that anyone even bats an eyelid here about the stuff that I eat, because, you know, compared to sort of Western palates, I guess, like China is looked upon as the country that eats everything, you know.
But, you know, we cook them properly. Yeah. With all kinds of ingredients, spices, stuff like that.
That's true.
Not like you. So,
no, I tend to...
So take one thing, for instance, and tell me the texture and the flavor of it, because I'm really curious about it.
Okay. Tadpoles. If you think about what a tadpole is, it's just a sack full of guts, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and guts are full of poo. And so they taste really sharp. It's like a wet sack of very sharp tasting...
Taste sharp?
Sharp. Like, you know, if you leave orange juice in the fridge too long and you sip it and it's like, oh, that's sharp.
Okay.
One of the most revolting flavors that I can possibly imagine.
Okay.
Tadpole, just bags of poo, basically.
And of all the foods I just mentioned, which one is the most delicious to you at that time?
Of all the weird ones, I think giant armadillo has been my favorite. I walked into a village. I didn't kill the armadillo. They're endangered, I think. But it was killed by a tribe, and I walked into the tribe and they'd smoked this armadillo meat. And so I bought half an armadillo and ate that for, you know, a couple of weeks, I think. And we had a decent amount of it, but the most beautiful, tender smoked meat that I could possibly describe, literally melted in your mouth. And I think that is my key to food being good, actually, is just how soft and succulent the meat can be. Like, I've eaten quite a few goats now, and goat meat can be a little bit tough, can't it? But I've got the knack, taught to me by Aboriginal Australians, of doing these underground ovens. And if you get it right and you sort of dig out a hole, put stones in the hole, make a huge fire on it, superheat the stones, then put the legs just straight on the stones, cover it in leaves, cover it in earth, leave it for about 4.5 hours, then you can, your granny could eat it without any teeth. It's amazing.
Oh, to you, as long as the food was cooked during those expeditions you took, that was good because it was cooked. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I try and cook things. It depends whether I've got a fire going, really, or not. It depends. I mean, I didn't obviously start out doing survival stuff. I kind of fell into that for the sake of television, really. There was a slight psychological sort of shift there in terms of me wanting to challenge myself. But I wasn't a survival expert. And so, you know, the first part of my career, military expeditions, I lighted a fire with a lighter and I cooked food over a fire, you know, and that was normal. But then it's only latterly, since I've done the survival stuff, that I started eating raw things, but mainly because I'm rubbish at getting a fire going.
Well, in China, we have a saying which goes, a child at 3 could really tell the kind of adult he or she will become later in the future. So looking back, when we look at young Ed Stafford, maybe at, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, could we see the hint of the explorer and survivalist he will turn out to be later in future?
I think you could see, in a 7, 8-year-old version of me, you could see that I thrived in the outdoors. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think
so you were very physically strong, right?
I was big for my age, but it wasn't so much strength as an avoidance of people. The nature was my safe space. Okay. You know, nature it wouldn't reject me. You know, the thing I think in my childhood that has defined me more than anything else is being adopted, being given up by my natural parents, going into foster care, and then coming out the other side of that. There was a deep sense of insecurity, you know, abandonment issues essentially. But I think that the compensation for that and the sort of learned coping mechanisms like escaping into nature have formed a big part of my personality and my drive to, you know, beat my chest and try and prove myself, because, you know, the inherently insecure child that needed to demonstrate how tough he was to survive in the world then, ended up doing that as a career.
See, because I hear that psychologically it's believed that failing to form a bond with one's natural mother, biological mother, is going to do so much harm on a child.
You see it in incubator babies as well. It's not just adopted babies. So even for a short period of time, if you've separated a child from its mother, I read a book called The Primal Wound, and it describes exactly this. And it's from my perspective, it's not a sob story. I wouldn't change anything in my life. I'm so pleased that things have turned out how they have, but also that I went through everything, because it does make you who you are. But a baby is essentially helpless. The one thing that it's programmed to do when it comes into the world is forge a bond with its mother mainly. And I think because my mum was really young, she was only 16 when she had me, 15 when I was conceived, and so very, very young. And so they made the decision to put me up for adoption. And I think that split causes a life-threatening trauma to the baby, because it doesn't know what's going on, and the only thing it's been programmed to do to survive gets interrupted. And so, you see similar, adult behavior in a lot of adopted people and incubator babies, and that separation causes quite sort of predictable patterns. Like, you end up sort of losing sight of your own personal wants and needs and trying to please the people around you, because your ultimate goal is to be loved by them. So you lose sight of yourself a little bit. And I think that actually plays into a lot of the challenges that I've set myself. People are like, I don't know how you could do that. I wouldn't put up with things. But I've been throughout most of my adult life quite happy to sit through quite extreme hardship, completely unbothered about my own comfort. And actually, it was only when I went on an island with my wife and my first son for a TV survival project that I recognized I wasn't happy for him to be uncomfortable at all. I suddenly, whereas I would have, to get the footage for the TV, I would have stayed up all night. I would have, worked every hour of the day. I needed him to rest. I needed him to be comfortable. And it suddenly made me realize how lacking in that kind of love I was for myself.
I see. I can relate to that a little bit, because I myself, my parents divorced with each other when I was 11, 12 years ago.
Okay.
That was a very crucial age for a girl, because I was old enough to know everything, but I was still so young to control my life. So very vulnerable, very powerless, that kind of thing, very insecure.
Yeah. I think there's very few kids that grow up without something quite dramatic and traumatizing. They talk about big T and little t trauma. And it doesn't have to be the big ones. It doesn't have to be an alcoholic parent. It doesn't have to be abuse. It's just how the baby or the child interprets it and then adapts its behavior in order to cope at the time. But then how that behavior then carries on into adulthood that just isn't beneficial anymore. It's just outdated programming.
Exactly. And how old were you when you were adopted by your parents?
8 weeks. It was all very early on in my life.
Oh.
So it was from a baby to 8 weeks old. And I was in foster care for the first 8 weeks of my life. And when I turned up with my mum and dad in Leicestershire, I was fat, because apparently I didn't stop crying the whole time. I was just crying. And the foster mother just gave me Weetabix. It's this cereal that we have in the UK. But huge bowls of Weetabix. And obviously you shouldn't really give a baby solid food at the beginning, but she just stuffed me full of solid food because it quietened me down. But she got sacked from her job because of that. But as a result, I was an enormously fat 8-week-old baby.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's funny talking about that sort of period, because I spent my life kind of trying to demonstrate how tough I am. And I say that now with a kind of self-awareness of the ridiculousness of it. And yet I still find it, I don't know, slightly awkward talking about it in public, because you're talking, well, grow up. You're a man. This happened to you when you were a baby. You couldn't even remember it. This has nothing to do with your life now. And yet I firmly believe it does.
Yes.
I really do. I think the the makings of your whole character start from super young, much younger than people realize. And so I do think it's relevant. And even things like when I did get adopted into a middle-class family in Leicestershire, they listened to my dad's mum, my granny, who said that, when he cries, leave him down the bottom of the garden and just until he stops crying. So you've got this traumatized baby that's come in from being adopted, but rather than compensating by giving it lots of love, their plan was just shove it down the bottom of the garden. And I think I just sort of learned to shut up and realize that nobody was coming and that I had to face the world on my own. And I think that also, the combination of the two, because I'd been adopted, then just being left at the bottom of the garden and this sort of cry it out concept of getting babies to stop crying, I think reinforced the trauma. Yeah.
That was harsh. Yeah. So you had always known that you were adopted by your parents, right?
Yeah, I have. I've always felt that was a good thing. I was pleased that they'd always...
To know that.
Yeah, because it was never a shock. It was never like they lied to me or anything like that.
How did they tell you, just to ease things in?
I don't know. As far as I can remember back, I've always known. So they obviously told me at an age where it didn't mean anything, and then talked about it enough that it just was always an understanding that I wasn't their natural child. But that didn't... Like the bond that I had with both my adopted parents was as if they were my parents, really. And I love them both to bits. Still, my mum's still alive, still love her to bits. But I've latterly come to think that it did potentially, knowing the whole time, did set me up for a sort of repercussion psychologically, that I always knew that I'd been given up at birth, and therefore I think that did have an effect on a child who was immature and emotionally not developed enough to handle the fact that he'd been adopted. Yeah. Although I thought it was a good thing, I think potentially it could have made things worse, actually.
Did you hate your biological parents, or hate is too much of a word?
I didn't hate them. I had an intrigue to...
Intrigued?
I was intrigued to know who they were. I was happy. I thought, right, I've been adopted, but I was lucky. I got adopted into a really loving family. I loved my mum and dad. I had an adopted sister, so not blood related to me or my parents, but we both got adopted by this couple in Leicestershire. As I started to have, as sort of behavioural things started to poke their head up, in terms of getting into trouble at school and stuff, and having I would say a rage started to build inside me. I did realise that something was going on, but I didn't attribute it to being adopted at the time.
You said you were very volatile. That's the word you used to describe your childhood and teenage years, right? So a boy with lots of temper, that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's an African proverb, I think it is, that said the child that doesn't feel the love of the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think that resonated hugely when I heard it for the first time. And there was a destructive rage within me. Yeah, I just didn't know why, but that I could smash every wall down. That's
real, or that's just a metaphor when you say smash things?
Well, it was a metaphor, but I have smashed a lot of things.
Like what?
Well, okay, it started quite innocently. Like I remember being at Scouts at the age of, say, 8, and there being a big pile of firewood, and they said, "Ed, here's an axe. We need you to chop that firewood." And by the time I'd finished chopping the whole pile, which is the size of a small car, it was a huge pile of firewood, and I did the whole thing in about 20 minutes. Every single Scout and the leaders were standing around watching me because it was such a display. I literally just went into almost psychopathic mode and just was smashing. It's like, it would have been quite obvious, I think, to a psychiatrist watching that there were some issues, coming out. And it did lead into being expelled from school and then latterly getting into fights as a teenager in my early 20s as well. And so, there was an anger in me, and I think you do often see it in boys when there is a sadness. quite often anger gets put over the top of it. And so it comes out in an aggressive way.
Did you do good in sports? Like rugby, football, that kind of thing?
I was a good rugby player. I was big for my age. And I think that was one of my salvations, actually. One of my first lifelines of realizing that I was competent at something. And I was a good head taller than all of the other boys. So I could literally, if I decided to grab the ball, I could take it off the other people and run through them and score a try. And I think coming from such insecurity, it was like a lifeline, really, to actually be good at something. And it gave me a lot of confidence, actually. Yeah.
So was it possible that you might become a rugby star to go pro? No. Was that possible? No. So you were good, but
I wasn't that good.
So you were good, but
I was captain of the school and stuff like that.
But not that good.
Well, I don't know. I never took it that far. I started getting in trouble before I got to the age where I guess I could have, if I trained hard, and I could have potentially been professional at club level, but not sort of international or anything like that. But yeah, it's being disruptive became more interesting than training for rugby, I guess. I like my sport. I still follow rugby, but I'm just pleased that I didn't go down that path myself. Yeah.
And growing up in Britain, because Britain has a long tradition of expeditions, explorers. So that must have had a huge impact on you.
It's funny, since I've entered this world, I've read a lot about explorers, but going back, no, I think your earlier focus on sport was actually more of my influence as a child. I don't think I entered this world because of having heroes who were explorers. I stumbled into it post-military as something that was more interesting than going and working in the city and becoming a stockbroker, which is my original plan after leaving the military.
Was that a possibility for you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I started doing a certificate in securities, which is the kind of exam that you need to become a stockbroker, and I was reading the Financial Times every day and networking with all these men who were working in the city, and I. You know, when you read an article that you're not really interested in and you get to the bottom and you haven't taken a word of it in. So I was having to read them about 3 times and then essentially recognized that not only was it when did I leave? 2002. Okay. So there was a financial downturn. Everyone was struggling to keep their own jobs. But so I couldn't get a job, I think was the honest truth of it. Not that I decided not to, but I'm very glad that there was... that I went down the route that I did, because it avoided, potentially another career which wouldn't have allowed me to become the person that I have become now. Yeah.
But I thought you majored in geography.
I did.
In college.
That was because geography was 7 hours a week of lectures. And I started doing mechanical engineering for a day, and that was 35 hours a week. And at the end of the first day, they said, has anyone got any questions? So I put my hand up and I said, how do you change off this course? And everyone laughed. That had nothing to do with wanting to be an explorer. Although latterly it ended up being something that was a useful degree to have.
Yes. I'm not being superstitious or anything, but I do believe in fate or something, it's meant to be.
Yeah, I do believe
How
in fate.
How perfect can it be? You major in geography and you had your training in the military. And that all comes together to make you the perfect guy to be an explorer and survivalist.
I've never thought of it that way, actually. But yeah, you're right. I do believe in fate as well. I just think it gave me the skills, and therefore this opened up as an option to me. Not many people, I guess, would even register, I'm going to go and lead an expedition. Like it's not really on many people's, career path. Okay. That's where they're going to go. But yeah, you're right. It was on mine because I had that skill set, I guess. Yeah.
So your first plan was to become a stockbroker, to make big money, right?
It's a cliche. Ex-British Army officers are normally quite arrogant. They're normally, so they've got the confidence, they can make decisions, and so they do well in the city, where you have to make snap decisions very quickly, and they've got to be uber confident, and they do well. I'd assumed that was, I didn't really know myself in the military. I think this is why I'm not really embarrassed of the fact that these were years where I wasn't making conscious decisions based on a real life goal. I hadn't found myself at all. And I think it was the expeditions that enabled me to do that. And so I stumbled into a lot of it, but I think, yeah, as I said, it's worked out well.
Okay, walk with me here. What was the first major journey that was taken by yourself on your own terms? It doesn't have to be an expedition, but maybe one of the journeys you took back in your college years or even your childhood, but that was really major to you.
My village was in the English countryside, so I was very used to roaming the fields, building dams and dens and tree houses and stuff like that. Then that sort of affinity to nature got compounded by the fact that I did the Cubs and the Scouts, and so I learnt to administrate myself in the field. So I learnt to pack a rucksack, to navigate, to look after myself, to lead people. And so those skills helped me be comfortable outdoors, I guess. But I don't think I actually carved my own path, you know, aside from joining the military, which again uses those skills. I don't think I really carved my own path until I decided to walk the length of the Amazon. That was the first time I had the wasn't even emotional maturity, but I had the sort of confidence to do something like that on my own. I think I was quite a late developer. I think it's been from that moment on, that's been the thing that really was the catalyst for change in my life, and where I came back a different human being to the one that I went in. I think that's been the point in which I'm proud of my life from that point onwards.
So maybe joining the army might be your first so-called major solo trip, solo journey, because that might be your way of fighting off the mediocrity of daily life to do something extreme, to do something exciting.
Yeah, I think on the face of it, it was. I wanted to avoid getting a job where I was stuck behind a desk. I didn't want to, be commuting to London and sit behind a computer and become a number, essentially. Although I joined the military and became a number, it represented a more adventurous life, I guess. Okay. I wanted the structure. I felt I didn't really have an anchor in those early years. And the military gave me a structure. You will get up at this time and you will, this will be the structure of your day. And this is when you'll be teaching a lesson in navigation. And this is when you'll be on the ranges with your soldiers. And, it gave me a structure to operate in which felt comforting. It felt like it was respectable enough to keep people off my back. I'm not just drifting through life. I've joined the military. I'm an officer. It was credible enough to stop people asking questions. But it wasn't me, and I don't think I was terribly good at it, if I'm honest, either, because I hadn't really developed that confidence yet to be a very good officer. I wasn't inspirational, for example. I think if I was given the same jobs as a platoon commander now, I could really inspire the soldiers and lead them well. I have that sort of innate confidence due to the experiences I've had since, but at the time I was, taking shortcuts, and I remember getting reviews. You get sort of reports at the end of the year from your commanding officer, and they were pretty damning, to be honest. They were. I remember saying to him, "I'm gonna leave on the first day I'm allowed to leave," which was 4 years after starting the military. And he said, "Yeah, that's probably a good idea." He literally did.
Did you ever get promoted?
Yeah, I left as a captain.
Good. But just now you mentioned something I find very interesting. You need to be restrained, or to be given a routine to feel some kind of comfort, and to feel free.
Yeah, because I didn't have any self-direction at the time. I didn't really know who I was. I think this is why I had to reference the adoption thing. The adoption thing was so significant in my life that I gave up my own wants and needs. So I didn't really know who I was. It gave me structure because I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah.
And you once said that before you walked the Amazon, that was before 2008, you sort of made people around you uneasy all the time. And afterwards, you would keep apologizing to them. I'm sorry.
It's because I kept getting into trouble. Yeah, alcohol had been my vice for years. And
beer? or what?
Well, mostly beer, but anything. And yeah, on a big night out, everything. And I got myself into trouble time and time again. I would get into fights. I would been arrested by the police a number of times. I would disgrace myself at weddings, punch father.
Weddings?
Yeah, punch people in the face at weddings.
In someone else's wedding?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. No, disgraceful behaviour. And part of walking the Amazon was an escape from shame, actually, of the trouble that I would get myself into. So it really was, when I say it was life-changing, it took me away from being a volatile hand grenade who had no sense of who he was, and it suddenly stripped me. It was like being reborn. I've got to say, it was. I was stripped of my confidence, first of all, in the Amazon. I might have been a captain in the military, but you walk the length of the Amazon, no one cares or knows what rank you were. No one's saluting you, and you're stripped back to the absolute basics. And I think there was certainly times during that expedition in the first year when we were going through Peru, where when I wrote the book, I went through all of the journals that I'd written by hand in my hammock, and a lot of them were smudged because of my tears in the hammock. I was a mess for that first year, but it was good that the expedition broke me down, because then just little things started to happen. Like I could walk across a fallen tree over a river and not fall off for the first time, and I could sharpen my machete in a way that actually made it stay sharp all day, and my confidence started to regrow, but based on such small things. It was the first time I actually developed an inner sense of self-esteem and self-confidence, but it was not based anymore on what other people thought of me. It was based on my own understanding of being competent at something, and I think therefore it was a rebuild. It took the lid off all sorts of psychological things in terms of a lot of time alone, but it was the beginnings of the new version of me, certainly.
Okay, so speaking of those tears, when you shed those tears, was it because of sadness, loneliness, or just sheer happiness?
It wasn't sheer happiness, that's for sure. It was fear, I think, more than anything.
Fear of what?
People would constantly say you're going to get killed in the next. I walked through this area called the Red Zone, which is a very lawless area of Peru. The police don't enter this area. It's policed. The whole area is full of the drugs traffickers.
I watched that episode. Yeah.
And so, literally every single piece of advice when you leave a community is you can't go the way you're going because they'll kill you in the next place. And so you've got this constant paranoia or fear. And I latterly do think, looking back, that they were being a bit melodramatic because I wasn't a threat to anyone. Aside from the fact that I was filming, which I guess isn't great if you're doing an illegal activity like drugs trafficking, but I didn't feel like I was a threat to anyone. My Spanish was terrible at the time, and I would make up in my head that the guides who I was walking with were plotting to kill me and things like that. So I was also really, really starting to unravel mentally, and I think therefore, I hadn't seen anyone that I loved or that was close to me for 6, 7, 8 months by this point. And so I felt very alone. And I think, I'd put myself in a position where I wasn't going to give up. I felt miserable. It felt like a prison sentence, a stubbornness within me that just wouldn't let myself give up. And my dad always used to say, if you're going to start something, you need to see it through to the end. And that very much stuck with me. And I think it would have been embarrassing to go home, and so I wouldn't let myself go home. I needed to prove to myself. It was so important. It was like my whole identity was riding on it. I needed to prove to myself that I could do this. But I remember it was almost animalistic for a while in that Peru section. I had one question that if the answer was yes, made the day a successful day. And that one question was, have you moved forward? It wasn't, are you happy? Or, have you had a nice day? Or have you eaten well? It was just like, physically, have you physically moved forward? If the answer was yes, that's fine. As a result, I didn't have any of the skills of how to look after myself. Mental health wasn't a thing back then. It was just endurance. And so I'm sure that I was in a totally dysregulated state of fight or flight the whole time. You know, I have no doubt that there was cortisol flooding through my system the whole time. And, you know, there was no respite from that at all. And so I was fried, essentially. And then it was only through things like eventually I started walking with Cho, who...
Cho's amazing, by the way.
Cho is amazing. Yeah, still amazing. He started walking after 5 months with me, and it took me a while to get to know him and to actually appreciate and like him. But he was confident. That was the main thing. He just had an ability to, through being confident, that rubbed off on me, you know. And I recognized my own weakness at the time, but I think you know, it's. I also recognized that he was as close as I had to family, and it ended up, you know, he said he'd walk with me for 5 days. He walked with me for 2 years of his life, literally never went home, which is an incredible thing to do for somebody else. And, you know, partly self-driven because he wanted an adventure, he wanted an experience himself, but also partly because he recognized my need for him, I think. And so there was a big selfless element to it as well. And so I do owe him a huge amount. And I remember when I tried to get a book deal for him when I came back, because he's got an amazing backstory. He lived through the time of the Shining Path, the communist guerrillas, and I think about the age of 11, he had to go up into the mountains. The Shining Path had attacked his town. His mum and dad were in the town, but he lived up in the mountains on his own. And he could hear all the gunshots and explosions going off, but he survived on his own up in the mountains. He also...
How old was he then?
11.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I know. And he also burnt himself. He spilt kerosene, I think it was, over his lap and set a light to himself when he was about 13 now. And burnt himself so severely that he had to have skin grafts put on both thighs. Was told he'd never walk again. He was in a sort of jungle hospital, a very poor one, without much facilities, and his skin grafts started getting gangrenous. So he then had an uncle, I think, who took him up to Cuzco, where the air was clearer and it was up at altitude and less humidity, importantly. And then it put him in a clinic there, a rehabilitation clinic, and eventually his legs healed. I think it took him 11 months to walk again. And then he ended up being the person who walked with me at the length of the Amazon. So he told he would never walk again, took 11 months to heal, and then saw so much strength, I think, through going through that at such an early age. And he was also so wise. He would have this expression when I would be tying myself in knots. And, for example, we'd run out of food and I would go to bed and I would obsess about certain cakes that you can buy in England called Mr. Kipling's French Fancies. And I would think about them so much, and it sounds comical, but that it would stop me sleeping. So I'd then, you know, when you can sort of tell it's going to get light again and you know you've not slept and you think, I'm not going to be able to even face the next day. And Cho would look at me as if I was completely crazy. And he had this expression which was cuando hay, cuando no hay, which meant when there is, and when there isn't, there isn't.
Cuando. That's the only Spanish word I know.
Is it? Yeah, cuando.
Because there's a song.
Oh, is it? Right, yeah. Okay. And at first I was annoyed by it because I thought that's obvious. When there is, when there isn't. But it was all about this time when he'd spent up in the mountains when the Shining Path attacked. He recognized as an 11-year-old there was no point in focusing on the things that he didn't have because he didn't have them and he was just wasting energy. And he just recognized it was literally his own innate wisdom that he had to accept the way things were. And then if he was neutral, he could then move forward positively. And you know, he was teaching me stuff that he'd learned as a kid.
So people like Cho really put things into perspective for you, you know, to look at things differently.
I think so. I mean, I love my dad. My dad died when I was just starting to join the military, my adopted dad, I say.
Okay.
But I don't think he was... You know, you've got some parents who will literally tell their child, you should behave like this is good, this is bad, this, you know. He didn't really do that. The thing about not giving up was the one thing I do remember him saying, but I don't feel like I had a very strong sort of male role model in my life. He'd had cancer quite a few times, like 5 times, I think, by the time he died. And so he was physically quite frail. And I think people like Cho, who stood out from the sort of typical soldiers who were influential in my life, who ended up sort of replacing that sort of father figure, I think. And Cho was more like a brother figure than a father figure, but certainly a big influence.
Cho is a lot younger than you?
Cho was 5 years younger than me.
Okay.
So he'd be about 45 now.
Oh, where's he now?
He's married. He's got a kid. Lives in Satipo. He married a Shipibo lady, which is an indigenous tribe out there. When did I last see him? Maybe 5 years ago. Which, considering walking the Amazon, was 12 years ago, I think now. He's good. I wanted to help him enjoy the same sort of life-changing effects that I had from walking the Amazon. And I, for example, I started the story, I don't know why I didn't finish it. I started trying to help him get a book deal when we came back, but the publishers just said that, really sorry, Ed, that's not how the publishing industry works. No one's going to read a book by a Peruvian man. You're like, maybe this will make an article in the newspaper at the weekend or something. I recognised that a lot of my success came from the fact that I was white and I was English and that I spoke English and that I was in a niche of very privileged people who were accepted as explorers. And, he was a Peruvian man, and as unfair as that is, even though he was more competent than me, braver than me, carried me through it for a lot of it, he didn't get the same recognition. And so I've always tried to help him. Fortunately, he's got a family that bleed him of all his money. So a few times I've given him quite a few £1,000s just to help him. At one point it was set up a chicken farm, other times it was different things. And every time I've given him money, his family have taken it all from him. And so it's, after a while, you just go, okay, I can't continue to do this. But yeah, you can't fix other people's families and other people's lives from afar anyway, can you? But he came over to England after walking the Amazon and lived with my mum up in Leicestershire for about 6 months and played rugby for my local rugby team. And he became like a brother to me. I certainly didn't treat him like a lot of British explorers would have treated their guides, I think. He was my equal. We walked the Amazon together as equals, really.
He actually spent a few months living with your family.
Yeah, because I lived in London. He was living up in Leicestershire, so I'd go up on the weekend and see him. But the guys who were my friends who he played rugby with would they'd take it in turns to drive to my mum's house, pick up Cho because he couldn't drive, take him to rugby, then take him out afterwards, and they looked after him, and then one of them would drop him back at the end of the night. He was very happy, but his visa ran out, so he went home, and then he got caught up in the sort of politics of home and stayed back there.
Because we Chinese believe that you cannot give someone money because you're not supposed to give them a fish. Instead, you can give them fishnet to teach them how to fish.
It's funny, he was competent in so many ways and wise in so many ways. And yet outside of the jungle, it didn't translate quite the same.
I see.
I remember I paid for him to do an English language course in Lima so that he could get on a study course in England, but he had to get his English up to a certain level. And unfortunately, he just, with the money that I gave to support him to buy books and stuff, he was getting drunk and he didn't have the same wisdom outside of the jungle that he did in the jungle. And again, there was me sort of thinking naively that, he didn't necessarily wanted to be lifted out of his life. He didn't necessarily. I think that was my dream, not his.
Exactly. But how did you come up with this idea? One day I'm going to walk the entire length of Amazon. How did you choose one route or one particular destination?
I read a book called Running the Amazon, which was a team of kayakers who paddle down the river from source to sea. And
why did you read that book in the first place?
I was leading expeditions in Belize, and it was on the shelf in the field base in Belize, and I took it and I read it, and it was inspiring. But the expedition, they were whizzing past in these plastic canoes, wearing their plastic helmets, and I remember a couple of times they had arrows fired at them by indigenous tribes while they were paddling down the river, and I just thought, how much more interesting would that expedition have been had they not been like whizzing past all of these communities in the middle of the river on a boat, if they'd actually been walking through and having to look all of the tribal chiefs in the eye and actually communicate with them and talk to them. So I thought that was what inspired me to do the expedition. And then when I realised nobody had ever done it before, I then thought, well, actually, that's quite that means that if I can get sponsorship for this, I could get a Guinness World Record, and then suddenly it could be something that that I wouldn't have to pay for myself, that I could actually get a corporate firm, which is what happened, to sponsor me.
Did you have any idea how long it would take?
Yeah. Well, no, I thought it would take a year, but that was only because I wanted it to take a year. So I divided the length of the river, which is nearly 4,000 miles, by 365 days. And I think I came up with 11 miles a day, which seemed quite a reasonable distance to walk.
In the city, it can be done.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But obviously, I didn't reckon on the fact that there wouldn't be any paths for most of it, and I'd be cutting a route through the jungle. I mean, I think our worst day ever, with an 8-hour full walking day, was 800 meters. So
800 meters.
800 meters in the entire day. But half of that was flooded forest. I mean, sometimes we were pretty much always hacking through the jungle if there wasn't a trail. And even if there was a trail, it was probably going off in a different direction to where we actually wanted to go.
So the river was always on your left side, right?
No, I mean, we loosely followed the channel of the river, but there were no rules. I just started at the source, and by any means possible, by any walking route possible, went to the mouth. And so sometimes it would be a tribe that said, no, we're not going to let you come through on this side. You need to... they didn't say you need to cross over. They just said, you cannot come through. So we'd paddle across the river to the other side and then continue on the other side. Sometimes it would be, I don't know, really thick bamboo or razor grass or terrain differences. But yeah, we ended up crossing the river quite a lot. And it was one of the reasons that I actually sort of developed my own sort of moral compass, because we hired a couple of guides initially, and we had 2 pack rafts, Cho and I, which are these inflatable rafts. They're only meant for one person, but we hired 2 indigenous guides called Alfonso and Andreas, and they started paddling with us, and they sort of doubled up in one pack raft, and Cho and I were in the other pack raft, but they realised that if they didn't paddle very hard, they'd drift downriver and they'd have less far to walk. And so once they did it the first time, I was like, okay, we can't do that again, because I'm saying that we're walking the Amazon and we've just drifted downriver by about 300 meters. So they nodded and said that they knew what I was requesting, and then did it again the next time we had to cross the river. And over the course of the day, through a lot of frustration, I was getting more and more tense. They sort of drifted down the river, I would say 2.5 kilometers, so a significant part of the river not walked. And I said to Cho at the end of the day, we can't let that happen again, because we're saying that we're walking the Amazon.
That was like cheating, right?
Definitely cheating, yeah. And Cho actually said to me, no, Ed, we need to do the whole of today again. And immediately he said it, my shoulders relaxed, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's the right thing to do. And I think, again, I definitely accredit a lot of the values that I have in life now to the expeditions that I've gone on. And that was an undeniable lesson for me, a really stark lesson of doing the right thing. You know, before I'd been all tense and knotted up and angry at everyone, and you know, because I'm kind of internally covering up for something that I'm doing, which is dishonest, I guess. And the moment he said, we'll do it again, like, it took us days to hire a boat with a driver that was prepared to take us back upriver, drop us there, and then walk the entire route. But I didn't mind that extra cost and those extra days, because it just felt wholesome. It felt right. It's been those kind of lessons that has grown me up from that kind of lost adult that didn't have a moral compass, that didn't know the difference from right and wrong, that didn't have direction, to somebody who's now, you know, I, hand on heart, you know, I think I'm a good dad and a good father, and have a role in the world. But that wasn't always the case.
But I always say that you can't be an explorer and survivalist if you're not loosely hinged. That's the word used. Now I understand what you mean by that.
I just reckon that a lot of explorers have an innate need to prove themselves, and I don't think everyone does. If you're secure in yourself, if you have proper self-esteem because you've grown up in a loving environment, then you don't need to beat your chest, certainly not on that scale. You don't need to take the risks with your life. You don't need to...
Or we're just lazy.
I do genuinely think that a lot of the extreme exploration where people put their lives at risk is due to overcompensating for insecurities.
I see.
Yeah, personally.
So we always say that hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So before you started to walk the Amazon, did you have insurance? Did you write up a will?
I didn't write a will because I had nothing to leave.
But you had your mother, you had your sister.
Yeah, but I didn't have any possessions.
Okay.
Nothing. No house, no car, cheap Casio watch, a rucksack. That was literally it. So no, I didn't have anything. And so I didn't write a will. We did have insurance initially, but the insurance ran out because the expedition went on longer than it was meant to go on, and I didn't have the money to reinsure myself. So for the latter half of the expedition, we didn't have insurance. It became less safe, I would say, the expedition over time, because
that's an understatement. Less safe.
Yeah, but also as the expedition got a lot more dangerous as well, as we were going further from the river, Brazil, the distances between communities were huge. Like there was one time, I think, 40 days of walking through the forest without seeing any sign of humans, not a trail, not a single cut leaf with a machete, nothing. But for 40 days, that's a long time. And so there were times then when we'd run out of food and have to scavenge and find food in the jungle and fish for piranhas and stuff like that. We knew that if something went wrong and one of us slipped and had a bad head injury or got bitten by a snake, that we wouldn't have got out of there. No.
I remember at the very beginning of that documentary, when you walked the Amazon, your partner then Luke. After you climb up onto the top of the mountain, he took off his phone and called up his fiancée. And you were very annoyed, I remember. And afterwards, you look into the camera and, complain about how he might not be able to finish the journey with you because at that time, he had emotional attachment in the outside world.
He did. I don't feel that's a fair representation of the story looking back on it, though, if I'm honest. It's the one that the editors wanted to use, but I was difficult, certainly for that first period. Because I was under stress and strain, I think I projected a lot of that onto Luke. If you're going through something difficult and at home you end up snapping at your partner unreasonably because they're the closest person to you, I think, Luke was that. He was the equivalent of my partner at the time. And
you said you were like a couple trapped in very bad marriage. That was the word you used.
Marriage. Yeah. And I was mean. I think I was more intellectually intelligent than him. When you just have the upper hand in terms of sort of mental stuff, and you can be cruel just by the slightest tone of voice or slightly undermining somebody or just being that little chink in their armor.
I see.
And I think he started to unravel because of that meanness, and I'm not proud of it. And I think it was one of those things in the documentary that it was almost too subtle to have any. TV doesn't work unless you've actually got evidence of it. But we were filming, but it was too subtle to actually be something that I was able to cover on camera. Not that I would have wanted to cover it anyway, but I've tried to get in contact with him 3 times since we finished walking the Amazon, and each time he's just said, "I never want to have anything to do with you ever again." And I think that's
sad. So
I was, yeah, and I'm not proud of it at all. But it was a different human being back then that didn't understand. I thought all my problems were being caused by Luke. I thought I was being dragged down by him. He couldn't speak Spanish, so I was doing all the talking. He was a little bit overweight at the beginning, and he had a different sort of quite nice, actually, light, carefree attitude towards the expedition, but was a bit frivolous with money. And if you compiled all those together, I then character assassinated him. In my brain, I just thought this expedition will only be a success if he's gone.
See.
And therefore I take responsibility for that now. But yeah, no, him going home because of Katie was an easy TV excuse, really.
I see. So he's still angry with you now because he doesn't think he's properly portrayed in that documentary.
I don't know, because I've never had that conversation with him. However, it was far darker, really, than it played out. But you know, he was a really nice man. And like, I don't know, a silly, daft example was he could juggle. He was a good juggler, and he could juggle machetes. He could juggle
machetes.
Yeah, he was good. Like, he could take four I think, machetes and juggle them. And we just decided, like, because we were planning for the expedition, and we thought, are there cannibals in the Amazon? We didn't know if there were cannibals, but we thought if we got captured by cannibals and they wanted to eat us, his plan was to get out the juggling balls and start juggling, because he thought no one's gonna eat us if we're entertaining them. So he was light and really positive, and if I had been struggling less, he could have been a really nice contrast to me, less intense, less serious, and I think that lightness would have helped. I think I see a lot of that silliness that he had in my current wife, you know, and like, we're very different, me and my wife, and yet obviously different people can complement each other. You don't both, in fact, if you're both serious, then that's going to be terrible, isn't it? You know, it's nice to have somebody who breaks the ice, who's a little bit more entertaining and frivolous, and
you know, just have to be compatible.
Yeah.
Either in marriage or in a friendship, or when, you know, the two of you walk the Amazon together.
It was back in the day where this was all about ego. This was all about identity. And I think that fragile ego that I had felt threatened by Luke. You know, if we'd done it together, it would have been, two mates walk down the river, and I could see it turning out differently than if one person heroically did it on his own. And I think, therefore, again, not proud of it, but I think, you know, that sort of lack of support for him was akin to wanting him gone, really.
That was very honest, because back then when Luke left, so maybe on one hand you felt alone, abandoned, but on the other hand you felt, okay, so now I'm going to be the first person ever to walk the Amazon.
It was all ego. It
was kind of relief at the same time.
Fear and relief at the same time.
It's weird.
Yeah.
That's very honest of you.
Yeah. But I think in telling this story, I guess, and one of the things I really believe in about expeditions is that they are a catalyst for positive change, that they're a really good vehicle to throw somebody into something which is challenging, and then you know, the things that start letting them down are the things that bubble to the surface. And in this case with Luke, it was ego issues and competitiveness. But then that's the stuff you work on. And so you come out more hot as a result, because the thing that let you down was the thing you work on. So I think it would be unfair to not be honest about the mistakes I've made, because I guess it wouldn't be a true reflection of the story, and it wouldn't also give it shows how that I've come further, you know, because I wasn't, you know, this wholesome young boy who admired adventurers and just decided to follow in their footsteps in a really wholesome manner. You know, I stumbled into it, and I wasn't even particularly nice, because I was insecure, because I was out to, you know, prove myself in a very egoic way at the time.
So all the kindness you got during the walk along the Amazon really put you into perspective and really make you appreciate life more.
Yes. Like the kindness from Cho, but the kindness from everybody.
Emily, Elias, well, Emily, I think, is a really amazing woman. Where's she now, Emily?
I have no idea where Emily is now.
She's Italian?
She was an Italian anthropologist who I stumbled on in a village called, can I remember the name? No, I can't. But it was a long time ago now.
That's in the red zone or outside the red zone?
Yeah, in the red zone. So basically we stumbled into this village. I was walking with a young boy called Elias at the time. And
whose mother just got murdered. Whose
mother had just been murdered with a nail through the throat, incredibly, like 6 days before I met him. He walked with me, and he was the only person who would walk with me through this particularly dangerous part of the red zone. But yeah, we stumbled into this village, and this huge crowd of predominantly women blocked the path through, and they were chanting, but sort of angrily chanting.
And did they throw mud at you?
They didn't throw mud that one. They sprayed my face in plant dye, which was a sort of insult. One of them threw a bucket of water over me. It was the day after, I think, somebody had stuffed concrete in my mouth in a previous village, but they wouldn't let us through. And then at the back of this group of indigenous ladies who were very angry was a much taller lady, and this ended up being Emily, but she had the same sort of indigenous earrings and makeup on and stuff, and she sort of stepped forward through the crowd of women and held out her hand and said, "Are you English? My name's Emily." And it was just like this shining light, just like entering my world, and it was extraordinary. And she sort of took me under her wing, and because I started communicating with her, the village calmed down a little bit. She'd obviously gained their trust, but I didn't know about the Shining Path then. I didn't know about all the atrocities, and the reason they were predominantly women was because all the men had been killed in those troubled times in the 80s and 90s. So she was able to, one, introduce me to Cho, two, facilitate my path through this area, which was particularly difficult. And yeah, as you say, the kindness that I received from somebody, literally just being able to speak English again and actually communicate with somebody was amazing.
How long has she been staying in that village before she met you?
It had taken her 6 months to gain enough confidence from the tribe to be able to even enter the village. So she worked in a nearby town for the organization that oversees the indigenous rights for 6 months to gain their trust to be able to go in. She'd be going in and out of the village for quite a few months by that point. But, I just turned up with a rucksack and with a smile on my face and hoped it was going to be okay. But I just didn't understand the immediate trauma that these women had been through in the past decade or so. Virtually all of them would have been violated time and time again by these soldiers that came through as well. They really had a horrible time, and therefore it was disrespectful, looking back, turning up with the amount of historical knowledge that I had about these tribes. But I spent the entire time preparing for the expedition, trying to raise money to physically do it, and literally didn't have maybe the maturity, but also the time to research it in the depth that I think I would have liked to have done with hindsight.
Okay. And the whole time you had this huge backpack. I just wonder, how many batteries did you have? Did you have to carry? Because you had to film all the time, Well,
it wasn't just the filming, but it was also this commitment to blog. And it was back in the days when that was the way of communicating. It was pre-Twitter, so it's pre-social media, but I wanted to upload a blog. I tried to do it every week, and therefore I had a MacBook computer, and it was back in the days when a MacBook, you took the battery out of the bottom, so I had 3 MacBook batteries, but that was a big, heavy white thing with three batteries. I had the camera and all their, 2 cameras and all of the spare batteries. I had all the charging cables, and there were all these big British plugs and big cables and stuff. It was so much weight. I think the lowest my rucksack ever got to was 33 kilos, but on some of the bigger stretches when we were going a big distance through the jungle and therefore had to carry more food, it was up to sort of 45 kilos, which is heavy. It's a sort of weight where you're having to sort of go down on one knee and put it up on your knee first and then put your arms through it. You can't literally pick it up and put it on your back.
Did you have like an emergency kit, like a button, if I want to quit this journey, or I was really in danger, I need to get out of here, there's someone I can call?
We did in theory at first, and when the insurance was still valid, it would have worked. We had an EPIRB, which is an emergency position indicating rescue beacon, which in theory, if you pull the cover off and press the red button, it's like it's just a rescue beacon. It sends a signal up to a satellite, which bounces back, in my case, to Falmouth Coast Guard in the UK, and they have a list of numbers to call, which the first one for us was a team of ex-SAS medics from Hereford, and they would have come out to our position in the jungle, and they were on 8 hours notice to move to be at Bristol Airport to then fly out. But by the time they actually got to us, it would have been at least a week.
A week?
Well, at least a week if we'd been close to an airport. But, if they'd had to hire boats, trek through the jungle to find our location, it could have been 2 weeks easy. And, so in theory, we had this thing, you could press the button, but it's not like a helicopter.
It's useless, basically.
Yeah, essentially useless. And then when the insurance ran out, it was completely useless because no one would have paid for them to go anywhere. So we were just carrying around a big lump of plastic. It was, to summarize that, I wouldn't have done that expedition today with a wife and children. I was young, Cho was young, we had no responsibilities, we had nobody that was a dependent upon us. And therefore we took risks that I just would not take today. Risk assessments about certain legs of the journey that just came out, if you were to do a proper risk assessment, as unacceptable. We just grinned at each other and went, let's go.
So is it fair to say at that time, if death had to be a choice, you don't like it, but you wouldn't mind?
It was Cho's expression, but it was the sentiment of both of us. He said, "Si morimos, morimos."
What does it mean?
If we die, we die. And because we were getting threats on a daily basis, and they came across like threats, but they were warnings. The people that we asked if it was safe to go through, they would warn us, you can't go through that tribe, they'll kill you. And we could have tied ourselves in knots so much about it. We could have, we just had to become almost flippant about our life. And when, it's a very strange situation when somebody's terrified of you and you know that you're unarmed, you're completely non-threatening, you're just a tourist essentially with a rucksack on, and yet you're creating so much fear by literally being there, partly because of the trauma that the people that you're walking through their land have experienced in recent years. That it was a risky period, and definitely the most dangerous part of walking the Amazon was the people. I think it was we were closer to being killed by people than by jaguars or anything like that.
Before you started, how much money did you have, and how much money did you think you will be needing for the entire journey?
I started with, I thought the expedition was going to cost £33,000.
Give me a second. £33,000. Okay.
£500,000 RMB, something like that.
At that time, 2008, £33,000. That's like 300,000, something like that.
But not a huge amount. The combination of just miscalculating, the expedition taking over twice as long as I thought it would take. In the end, I think I spent £104,000. We lost our main sponsor after about 9 months due to the financial crisis that was going on at the time. He pulled out and said he can't sponsor us anymore. And so I actually ended up putting it was before crowdfunding was a thing, but we were uploading videos and blogs to the internet, and I put a little link to a PayPal account that we'd got and asked people to donate to the expedition, and cut a video to a Coldplay soundtrack and sort of tugged on people's heartstrings and asked people to donate to the expedition because we just didn't have any money, and we'd been walking for over a year by that point, and I just thought it would be such a shame for this expedition to stop just because of money. And at the same time, in order to save money, because walking right by the river was costing us a lot of money, because we were having to stay with people and invariably they would ask for compensation for that. We're having to buy food. Sometimes when the guides who would walk with us from a village to village, they'd want to go home, but they'd want to go by boat. So we'd be paying for their fuel to get back to their village by boat. And it was all costing us money. And Cho actually said, look, we can do this cheaper, but it's going to be more dangerous. We just need to head away from the river into the jungle. And that's actually when the expedition started to get a lot more what I thought walking the Amazon was going to be. Huge stretches of just jungle.
So you had to carry lots of cash with you?
Yeah, well, we did. But I mean, I think there's 6 international airports as you go down the course of the Amazon in total. So invariably, all of the towns have got ATMs. And it's not so long ago that you couldn't just go to an ATM with a Visa card and take out cash.
That's dangerous, though.
Yeah, a little bit dangerous, yeah. And I'd carry a lot of cash in my rucksack, yeah.
So at most, how much cash did you have in your pockets?
I don't know, but I would be...
Thousands?
Hundreds. I don't think I'd ever have more than about 400 quid, 500 quid maybe.
Okay.
Pounds. I think with walking the Amazon, you have to understand it was literally just me trying to manage the whole thing from a laptop that I would carried in my rucksack, and having to manage sort of administrational things like the battery power on the laptop limited my time online, but also the amount of data that I had on the data package that was very limited. So it was really trying to hold a business together from a swamp in the middle of the Amazon, really. And there was no support team at all. There was a lady who was doing my PR from the UK who was lovely, who agreed to do that for free. But that was it, really. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And during those 2 years, a lot of things happened around the world. Will you be able to keep up with all those news? Because I know one piece of news really hit you hard, the death of Michael Jackson, right?
I mean, I say that tongue in cheek. It was because, Michael Jackson died, and I had been a Michael Jackson fan as a child. Okay. But my sister emailed me, like, it was the only time she emailed me on the whole expedition, I think. Like, so many things happened, and then Michael Jackson dies, and she emailed me to check I was okay. Which obviously I was fine. But I mean, I didn't know often what happened. I mean, I remember coming back at the end of walking the Amazon, and everyone was walking around London following this little blue dot on their phones, but iPhones didn't exist beforehand.
Oh.
So it's like, I literally went in, everyone's using a Nokia, came out and everyone was using an iPhone. So it was quite a big jump technologically as well. I never used the internet really to check the news or current affairs or anything like that, just because I didn't have enough bandwidth or battery power. But considering the state of the news in modern times, that's probably not a bad thing. Quite nice to have a detox for that amount of time.
Yeah. Why do you think you happen to be the very first people who ever walked the Amazon?
Because it's a stupid thing to do. Well, it is. I mean, you go by boat, don't you? I mean, it's... and that's what literally every single community that we pass said, well, we don't understand, why aren't you going by boat? And I was like, well, I've set myself this challenge to walk it on foot the whole way. And they were like, you're crazy. Obviously, I'm glad I did it. It's like, but it was a very arbitrary, it might have been a Guinness World Record in the end, but it, a funny thing, it's almost like, okay, I'm going to walk across the Sahara in flip-flops backwards. It was a funny thing to get a record for. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, nobody else thought it was possible, but I just think people got overwhelmed by the enormity of the expedition, and I just broke it down into individual days and just said to myself, which single day of walking the Amazon is impossible? And I was like, no, none of them are, but surely then if you just bolt them together, that makes it a feasible task.
One of the things that really amazed me was at very first, you found 4 locations that all happen to might be the further source of the Amazon.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting.
There was a lot of expeditions to find the furthest source of the Amazon, one by the National Geographic, one by a Peruvian institution. And I think there was 2 metal crosses and 2 plaques all in different places. And it was slightly comical actually, because we thought we'd found the furthest source of the Amazon, and then, there's another one. So then we took more photos and, there's another one. And so in order to cover all bases, we then summited the mountain upon which those sources were. So Nevado Mizmi was the next day, and we were sort of kicking steps into the snow to get to the top of the mountain. But we then thought, okay, there's definitely no water above us now, so we can start walking. It was important to me that we started from the very beginning, obviously. I didn't want to get it wrong and then waste 2 years. And then somebody said, well, actually, you didn't go to the very furthest source. Like, a bit of a waste of time. Yeah.
And then you said 4 months before the end of the journey, you had this huge mental breakdown.
Yeah, I did. And I was quite confused at that stage, actually, that I was having a mental breakdown, because I think by 4 months until we were going to finish, I kind of knew that we were going to finish. Like, I had the confidence by that point to know that the bulk of it is done. Cho and I have gotten an amazing routine going. He loved fishing. I would collect the firewood and make the fire. We very much had found our rhythm with each other. And yet my default mood was incredibly negative. An example being, like, Cho would be 3 minutes late packing his rucksack in the morning. We say we're going to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning, for example, and it's like 7:05 or something. And I would get into this fuming mood. I was like, why is he always late? It was disproportionate to what was going on. Like, we've got 4 months of walking through the jungle. What does it matter?
How could you tell it was like 3 minutes? You kept watching at your watch or something like that?
Because I used to be in the military, didn't I? So I was like, he's late. And I would get so angry. And eventually, I mean, I'd try and keep it to myself, and then it would spill out because, you know, when you don't express your anger, it ends up coming out in just your tone of voice. And Joe could tell that I was angry at him, and it would go on for hours as well. And I didn't really understand it because, I thought I was going to finish. I was doing something that I passionately wanted to do more than anything else in the world. Like, my entire life was about walking the Amazon at the time, and it was working. And so I ended up, there was one of my friends actually wrote me an email asking me if I was okay, because they read the blogs and I think they could tell that my mental health was starting to slip. And they put me in contact with a neuro-linguistic programming expert. And basically I got the number of this guy who I had to use the satellite phone to call up, and we had 3 calls in the end.
That was how desperate you were at that time.
That was how desperate I was, because it was very unpleasant for Cho. It was very negative for me, and I was unraveling. I mean, it's not very tough explorer to acknowledge that you were unraveling in the middle of your expedition and that you needed counselling, but I really did. And he was just able to put things in perspective, really. He just said, look, you've been away from home for 2 years now. You've not seen anyone that you love for that period of time. And you're so obsessed with getting to the end that anything that stands in your way is the enemy, essentially. And he was just able to put things in perspective. And he was like, when you feel yourself spiraling into one of these negative states, he said, I want you to envisage somebody that in your life has been inspirational to you. And so I would envisage my first sergeant major, who was Mark Hale. Yeah, he was this amazing guy. He was. I joined the military just after my father died, and he was definitely the guy who inspired me and kind of filled that role. And he was a huge guy, rugby player, big scar on his face, but he had more depth than most of the soldiers. He was doing an MSc in psychology. He was a devout Christian, and he had this sort of aura of presence about him. He just commanded immediate respect. As I was spiraling into one of these childlike moods, I would just imagine him staring at me going, sir, what is going on here? And I'd realise that I could never behave like that if Mark was there, or if anyone else was there, actually. It was such indulgent behaviour. And it was just enough for me to step back from myself and realise that I had got things out of perspective. And he just gave me a few of these little tricks in order to regain perspective and mean that the rest of the expedition was a little bit nicer, and it was better for Cho as well. I was a more pleasant human being after doing that. But it was the first time I'd ever had a window into any sort of psychological help, I guess.
So when did you learn that Mark was killed later in an ambush in Afghanistan?
I said, didn't I, that I never used the internet to check the news, and for some reason this day I did. And you know, of all the days that I decided to use the internet for checking the news, I just threw caution to the wind, and I checked the BBC website, and it just said soldier dies in explosion, and it was Mark, and it was extraordinary. He'd obviously been the guy that I had chosen to continue to inspire me to continue in a more positive manner, and yet he was dead. And I latterly found out because I gave a talk back in Bristol, and there was a photo of Mark in the motivational talk that I gave, and just before I was about to start the talk, his daughter walked into the back of the auditorium and came and sat down, and I thought, my heart went into my mouth, and I thought, I can't take the part about Mark out of the talk because it's one of the slides. And so I gave this talk, like hoping that she didn't think that I was, capitalizing on the death of her father. But she came up at the end and gave me a massive hug and just said it was beautiful that I was speaking about him with such respect and keeping his name alive. But yeah, it turns out through talking to her that he died on the day that I'd started using him as a sort of, envisaging him. And like that, yeah, exactly.
You're giving me goosebumps.
He died on the same day, yeah. And so, again, considering I was quite a blunt instrument before I went into this expedition, there were so many sort of insights into the world and ways of looking at the world that I'd never really had a mind that was open to before. But it's like I can't.
There are things you cannot explain.
Yeah, couldn't explain it at all. It is sort of goosebump sort of stuff.
So the two of you were deployed together in Afghanistan?
No, I never went to Afghanistan at that point. We were together in Northern Ireland. So we did an operational tour together. He was my sergeant major and like he'd been in the military 20 years or so, and it was my first tour. So for some reason, he took me under his wing, and he was influential because of the fact that he obviously saw something in me before I did, I think, and he gave me his time. And for that reason, he had a place in my heart, definitely. But yeah, incredibly sad that he got killed.
Well, but still, after learning the death of him, his image, his spirit still kept you going.
Yeah,
for the rest of the 4 months.
It did. I mean, I carried on using him. And I still, to this day, use Mark as an example of the kind of human that I want to be in this world. He really was one of those shining examples. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't squeaky clean at all. He was a fighter as a young soldier, and as a sergeant major, if the soldiers did anything wrong, they had to march into his office and he would punch them in the stomach. That was his way of disciplining them. So he had his own unique ways. He wasn't an angel by any means, but he had a very positive effect on me. Yeah, my first proper mentor, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so how old was he when he died?
I'm going to say like 36, 37, something like that.
That's very sad. I remember I saw the photos you and Cho, at the very end of the journey. The two of you on this road, very decent road. And you said, at that time you said, the two of you could almost smell the ocean. And you were just so tired, but so happy at the same time. Tell me about that feeling, that really weird feeling.
Well, we were also exhausted. Like I'd booked, for some reason I booked my flights to go home like 3 weeks before we finished.
You were that confident?
Well, I just wanted to go home. But, and so it put this huge time pressure on us. And then I made a navigational mistake, and we were using black and white printouts of Google Earth that were literally from internet cafes. We just printed out copies of Google Earth because we couldn't find any maps that we could get. And I'd thought that a disused telegraph pylon was a road. And so something that should have accelerated us out of the jungle, a road, was just this wall of razor grass and thick brambles and stuff. And so it delayed us hugely. So by the time we did spill out onto that really lovely road, we were so late that we had to walk sometimes 19, 20 hours a day. We literally
19 hours a day.
19, 20 hours a day, literally to make the kilometers. And so
That's crazy.
I was grabbing 2 or 3 hours sleep at night, and trying. And at the same time, there was a lady called Fionnuala Sweeney who was big on some American ABC network or whatever, and she wanted to do live videos with me every day. So I was literally trying to stay sane, getting very, very little sleep, walking like 19, 20 hours a day. And I think the penultimate day, the day before we arrived at the beach, I passed out in the middle of the road, literally from exhaustion. For about 20 minutes, I was out cold. And when I came round, Cho acknowledged that we needed to have a bit of sleep. And we then had a couple of hours sleep, both of us. And then we had to, I think for the last 20 hours, we'd got like 80 kilometers to cover. And we walked all the way through the evening, all the way through the night. And then as the sun came up, these film crews started descending on us, like CNN, Reuters, all these press crews. And we just started floating down the street, and it
floating down.
Well, unbelievably floating on adrenaline, because we had nothing left in us at all. We were just exhausted, and then we could smell the salt and hear the sounds of the waves crashing, and then we rounded the corner and you could see the Atlantic spread out in front of us. So
beautiful.
Yeah, we just like shrugged off our rucksacks and grinned at each other and ran into the ocean and the rest,
hand in hand.
Hand in hand, yeah. I mean, I've stopped telling that as a joke, because back 10 years ago when I started doing my talk, because it's a gay joke really, and the world has changed now, and you can't really do gay jokes. And I gave it about 3 years ago, and I had sort of like a reaction from an audience. I was like, right, I can't tell a gay joke, which is fair enough. But yeah, it just shows how long ago this all is now, because we're talking 12 years ago. But yeah, we did hold hands running into the ocean, and he's the reason that I'm sitting here talking to you. I really do think that.
Did you cry when you stepped into the water?
I did cry. It was a big moment. I mean, he'd never even seen the sea before at that point.
Oh God!
Like, he'd literally never tasted salt water. He didn't know that the sea had salt in it, which I had to explain to him, because he came from this sort of landlocked part of the jungle, and so yeah, he'd never been on a plane. His elation and mine was just enormous, and then the added bonus was that it seemed like people cared as well. There was the beach was full of press and people, and I was just like, wow, this, because you're never sure, are you? You're like, does anyone even care that I'm doing this expedition? And yet it ended up being recognised. I was lucky. It was August, and in England everyone's on holiday in August, and therefore there's nothing in the news at all, because and we got on the front page of loads of newspapers, and yeah, it was a big success.
So that was the August of 2010.
Yeah.
So 2 years before the London Olympic Games.
Yeah, I guess.
Exactly 2 years. So did you ever ask Cho, why did you do it?
I think, like me, he's like the modern me. He had morals. He'd said he'd do it with me. He wouldn't have let me down. I do think that he is a positive man, and he wanted to embrace the adventure that was unfolding in front of him. But I also think he didn't want to let me down, and therefore I think he is definitely the most selfless man I've ever met. He's extraordinary guy.
That's very noble of him.
He didn't cut corners. He was solid. You know, when I was emotionally going up and down and up and down, he was constant the whole time. He was the perfect walking partner, with hindsight. I do think that in the Western world, especially those of us that live in cities, we've lost a connection to nature. And I do think that, I mean, Cho wasn't indigenous. He was Afro-Peruvian, so he was a sort of mixed race, African descent, and I guess European being the other half of his makeup. But he'd grown up in that environment, and he just felt comfortable in that environment, and he was wise in that environment, and he was therefore somebody that I could lean on. But as I've said, take him out of that environment, and he struggles like the rest of us. And I think it's difficult. It's a difficult world to navigate, and it's naturally more difficult now, 12 years later, than it was back then. You know, the world is an incredibly difficult place to navigate. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has been the sort of turning point for so many people. Yeah. And so many people are struggling. I mean, the suicide rates in the UK are through the roof. The leading cause of death for a man under 50 is not heart attacks, not cancer. It's now suicide, which is extraordinary. I don't know. It's why the work that I've started to do now, I think, is quite important, because I think just through, again, no design, no plan, I recognise that the adventures that I've gone on have taught me a lot about life and matured me as an adult, given me a moral compass, given me the sort of vehicle to evolve myself that has enabled me to be a dad and a husband. And therefore, I think if I can encourage other people to do similar sort of challenges and adventures and get people outdoors, then that's a positive way of combating this situation where we've got a big mental health problem at the moment.
Did you have a long period of time that you felt, okay, now I've spent so much time doing this extraordinary project. I spent 2 years on this journey, and now it's finished. What am I going to do next?
Yeah.
Do you ever feel lost?
Yeah, hugely. I do think I started to develop a sort of a confidence, an innate sense of confidence in the Amazon, but it's incredible how quickly that slipped away. I got very caught up in this sort of minor celebrity thing that happened when I got back, and it sounds laughable, but I was on TV and people cared, and like TV interviews, radio interviews, and book deals and TV deals, motivational speaking. Suddenly, I found myself
making big money.
For me at the time, yeah, huge money, but then I was spending it as well. I think I was sober maybe 7 nights of the first 6 months I was home. I partied. I told myself I deserved.
Well, you deserve it.
I told myself I deserved it, and so it was about 7 months after I got back that I was going into companies, insurance companies, banks around the world, tapping into the sort of highs and lows of walking the Amazon, telling my story and stuff, and I just felt like a sort of juggling monkey. I was sort of reliving those things in order to entertain people, or to, I guess potentially give them an insight into something that was beneficial for them in terms of their work environment. But I felt like a performer, and I therefore I was like, I'm not sure that this is what I did this for. I took myself off to a little cottage in France, and on my own for about 2.5 weeks, and I thought that I needed to finish the book that I'd writing about it, but I also thought I needed a bit of space to work out what I was going to do next, what was going to be the next expedition. And to my surprise, the answer that sort of popped up at that time was that the thing that would really make me satisfied was having a family, starting a family, and that was the thing that I felt was missing in my life. Rather than needing to beat my chest and prove myself again, it was the thing that was lacking in my life was a home and a harbour. And I guess a marriage is like a harbour, and so a ship is safest in harbour. It's where it gets repaired, it's where it comes from, it's where it feels safest. But a ship isn't meant to stay in harbour; it's meant to sail. And I didn't have a harbour really to come back from. I had my dear old mum, but I didn't have a family at the time, and certainly no dependents. And I felt like a lot of the lessons that I learnt in the Amazon would have been cemented had I come back to a home. But because I came back and I was completely unanchored, and I moved in with a friend of mine who'd just got divorced, and we just lived the life of Riley in London for 6 months. So all of the wisdom, all of the potential lessons kind of went in one ear and came out the other ear, which was a shame. But I did have this little epiphany that I wanted to. The thing that was missing was a harbour, was a base to come back to, was a little hub of love, I guess. But that wasn't to happen for quite a few years after that.
So after that journey, you were a grown-up man, because once you said, well, in some way you never really grew up. But after that, you were a grown-up man, right?
I don't know what a grown-up man is. I don't know. I got treated differently after that.
You got what?
Treated differently. Okay. Yeah, people took me seriously.
How so?
The boy that left, that was volatile, wasn't. I don't know. That was how I was perceived before. And as soon as I came back, he's the guy that walked the length of the Amazon. He's got credibility. And I think it's all a learning process, life, isn't it? I think, unfortunately, that there was an allure in that. I think if you have constantly gone through your life trying to please the people around you to try and forge that connection to them, if they're all suddenly saying that you're super tough, then that's very alluring. And the acclaim that I was getting was kind of my oxygen. Therefore, that's quite destabilizing. And I don't think I was ready at that point to start a family, which is probably why it wasn't presented to me by the universe. But it was the next project that I did. It was testing myself by putting myself on a desert island for 60 days without any tools or clothes. That was the thing that I guess was my next sort of rite of passage. That was the thing that I think turned me more into an adult.
Recognition and success can be really healing.
Mm-hmm.
But that can be dangerous as well, because that makes you want more, more recognition, more success.
I think recognition by people that know you and that have credibility is one thing. I think I had kind of this superficial adoration. I had very fickle media teams interested in me 1 minute and then not interested in me the next minute. It was a kind of more so celebrity thing, and I don't think that was as wholesome as having a mentor like Mark, for example, coming in and saying, look, what you did was extraordinary. Like, you need to take those lessons. And, I didn't have anyone to help me process it all and become wiser at the end of it. And I think that's what I'm saying in terms of the lack of harbour. Yeah, so I think I didn't feel like the challenge was enough. But I think latterly I've obviously just done a series called Rite of Passage, so I understand a little bit more about rites of passage and how they sort of mark significant changes in your life. And there's the separation phase where you go away. There's the challenge itself, or the transformational part, but there's also the being received by your community. And I think it was that final bit that wasn't there for Walking the Amazon. So although on the face of it, I'd done stuff that was tough and I'd learnt lessons along the way, it does need that integration into your life and that to one, be accepted by your peers and your elders, but also to help you learn the lessons that you've come back with.
I see. Come to think of it, the three major projects you did, the Amazon, the 6 days on that island, and Rite of Passage, really represented the three very different stages of your life.
They do, yeah, they do, and each one of them very valid and necessary at that time. And you talk about doing geography and things being in fate, but that I needed the Amazon when the Amazon happened. I needed the island when the island happened. The island ended up being far more about identity for me. It was something that really I was able to come back with a genuine identity. I mean, I don't know whether you want to move on to that now, but I found myself on that island, and let's face it, it was a construct. It was for television, so you would have thought that it wouldn't have had such a profound impact on me, but it did, because it was done incredibly really. I mean, like, I was literally left on that desert island. There was another Westerner crew member, but he was on an island 8 miles away, and they would pick up cards and batteries from the island once a week, but it was an unmanned drop, and they weren't even allowed to leave motivational messages or anything like that, so there would be a boat coming in doing that. But the most enormous thing that happened of all was just this overwhelming sense of panic. It took me a long time to work out why I was so panicky, but I've latterly learned this term, which is a kind of reflected sense of self in psychology, but because my whole life I've been trying to prove myself to other people so that I'd get this acclaim back. And you go into a room and you tell a joke and everyone laughs, you're funny. If you walk the length of the Amazon and everyone tells you you're tough, you're super tough. You go into an island where there's nobody at all. When you're looking down into the ocean and you can't even conceive how deep it is and you just feel almost giddy, or you look up into the stars at night and imagine the distances in the sky. And I felt like an astronaut that was cut free of a sort of spacewalk of an aircraft. I felt so unanchored, and I didn't know who I was. I literally didn't know who I was. So I decided one day, I think after about 9 days, I decided to sit down. I didn't have a pen or paper or anything, but I just decided I've got to make a list of who I am and what I stand for. And I was like, well, okay, started, and I was like, well, okay, do I want to be somebody that lets people down, that's not reliable? And I was like, no, I don't. I want to be somebody that people can depend on. So I was like, well, okay, right, dependable. And like, do I want to be somebody who, you know, cheats on their partners, or do I want to be honest? And I was like, right, I'd like to be honest. And then I stopped myself and I was like, what are you doing? You're just making up this stupid list of things that you want to be. And then another part of me stopped myself again. I was like, well, yeah, but Ed, if you don't make this up, who's going to make it up, you know? And so I carried on, and I was like, oh, I want to be reliable. I want to be kind. I want to be, you know, I want to have a good sense of humor. And it sounds somewhat farcical, but that's literally the person I became. In a world where nobody could see me, nobody knew who I was, I literally had no concept of who I was. And therefore that sort of infant that gave up his wants and needs in order to be liked by the people around him, for the very first time was trying to stumble through working out who he was and what he wanted out of the world and who he wanted to be and how he wanted to interact with people. And it's still today. That list is pretty much who I am.
I don't know if I should be using the word enjoy, because I really enjoy your documentary about you spent 60 days on the island.
Right.
And especially the very beginning, to me, that was very symbolic moment. You know, you got off the boat, you took off your clothes, and you walked toward the island.
Yeah.
Why did you have to take off your clothes to be naked on that island?
It was a stunt. It was before there was any naked survival TV programs. This was the first one. I think Discovery have made millions off another show called Naked and Afraid. But, you know, this was the first one, and it was copied, and that's fine. However, what I didn't realize was how vulnerable it would make me feel at the beginning of it. And obviously, as an adopted person, you know, literally you couldn't script it any more ridiculously that, you know, your big challenge is going to be you're going to get abandoned on this island naked. I think it was a huge trigger to me. I felt like a prat. I felt like just vulnerable. I just needed to cover up, and I couldn't cover up. And so it ended up being far more than the marketing stunt that it was originated for. It ended up being something that made it incredibly hard to cope with and to get off the starting line. And I think because I didn't have a knife, it was just having to really go through those initial survival priorities, but from a really vulnerable place. And it made the whole thing incredibly intense as well.
How long did it take you to get used to the fact that you would just walk around the island naked?
Well, I didn't. I made myself a grass skirt quite quickly, but which
that's pretty later in that series, right?
So after about
not
3 days, I think I've got a grass skirt on.
First. So you still felt the kind of urge, you know, the need to cover yourself up, even though you were just there alone by yourself. Nobody would see it. There was
such a sense of panic when I got dropped off because of that literal sense of not knowing who I was, that sense of no reflection. You know, I don't know. There was no one to say, that's not a good idea, Ed, or, you know, oh, that is a good idea, Ed, or, you know, there was no reflection at all. I would self-doubt myself the whole time. There was just something about making a grass skirt which was symbolically, I don't know, it was armor, I guess. In a world of feeling incredibly vulnerable, it was putting my armor back on. And I think we all do largely feel more protected when we're wearing clothes than when we're not. And because I was spinning out, it just seemed enormously important, more important than eating, more important than, and it does baffle some people that I would waste my time and energy on making a grass skirt. No. But for me, it was super important.
It's not just you, it's who we are. That's how we are built.
Yeah. That spin-off series that I spoke about, Naked and Afraid, there's a lot of Americans that go on that and they don't make themselves any clothes. They just walk around, all swinging around. And I'm like, okay, you're obviously
too much information.
Far more secure in yourself than I am. But I don't know, it just wasn't me. I just needed that protection.
Because I've been doing what I do for a very long time, in this TV industry. So I'm really interested in how you make that documentary. How real does it have to be in order to be called, this is the reality show? So was it allowed for you to send someone to go to the island first to scout, to see if there is enough drinkable water or there will be enough coconuts?
Okay, yes. In honest to your question, there was a recce done, and I think just from a health and safety perspective, that was the responsible way for the production team to start it. So a guy called Woody, who was ex-British Special Forces, went in about 3 weeks previous to me to the island, verified there was a water source, verified there was enough food to physically survive on, so that it would be possible to survive. They thought didn't make sense to put me on an island where there weren't the resources to enable me to, it had to be physically possible.
By food, they mean like coconut.
Mainly coconuts, but there was also a feral herd of goats on the island that had been domestic goats about 80 years ago that had become feral. So yes, it was physically possible to survive. But in terms of the realism of the trip, I filmed the whole thing myself. So I had cameras, I had 2 handheld cameras, and I had 2 GoPro cameras.
How many batteries did you have?
Enough to keep me going for about a week. In fact, initially there was a 1 drop a week, but the guy who on the next door island was ingesting because it was back in the day of tapes, so he was having to digitize all the tapes onto a computer, but he couldn't do it all in time, so he requested that we upped to 2 drops a week. So I think it was a Monday and a Thursday, for example. So I would take all my stuff over to the other side of the island. There'd be fresh cards and fresh batteries in there, and I'd put my used cards and used batteries in there. And we did a swap, but we weren't allowed to see each other. And one time, actually, just in terms of honesty, I wanted to see another human. So when they came in, I went and I hid in the bushes about 5 meters away, about as far away as that cameraman is there. And I didn't let them see me, and I never said anything, but I just wanted to see another human being. And so
that's so sad and sweet at the same time.
I literally hid there, and I was just like, okay, there they are. And yeah, that was incredibly real. I mean, it was important for me to test myself without Cho. I think if you were to really nail down the sort of personal reason for doing it, I felt very, very much that I lent on him a lot in walking the Amazon, and there were huge amounts of positives from that, because obviously we don't all walk through life on our own, and you don't have to prove yourself physically, but because of my own insecurities, I did want to prove myself as an individual, and therefore that was important. But I hadn't understood the enormity of isolation and the impact that it will have on a human. And I think, we're also used to distracting ourselves, be that with our mobile phones or cigarettes or drinks or food or caffeine or so many different things. When I found myself on that island on my own, I just because there was no distraction, it was like a mirror. So I was faced with this raw version of myself, and had to come to terms with that raw version. And I think I think everyone should have a period of isolation, because there's nowhere to hide. It's literally, if you've got demons inside you, if you've got skeletons in your closet, you have to face them, because you've got to live with yourself. You can't really, there's nothing to distract you. And I would try desperately to fill my days so busy. I remember making a schedule whereby I'd get up, and I'd stoke the fire, and I'd have a cup of tea, and then I'd go and work on my shelter for this amount of time. Then I'd give myself a 5-minute break, and I'd come back, and then I'd do some press-ups, and I'd try and fill my day to avoid having time where I was just sitting, because when I was sitting was the hard bit, because I had to sort of sit with myself.
I remember how happy you were to have your very first pot of hot water.
Yeah.
And I laughed because we Chinese are famous for having to drink hot water.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was important. I mean, it was. I think I had lemon leaves at the time, so in my head it was lemon leaf tea.
In your head, that was lemon leaf tea.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a vague hint of lemon. It was so important. I mean, I think partly because I basically learned from, again, so much of it starts from adoption. I'd learned to push certain emotions away. I was definitely scared. I was definitely lonely. I definitely had a lot of fear in me at the time, but I would push those emotions away and suppress them and didn't allow them to really come up because I just thought they're not useful. They're not going to help me at all. And I think when I got the fire going for the first time, because the emotions came up because of the positive emotions, like I was so elated to have, because the first, say 13 days, I think it took me 14 days to get a fire going, about that. I'd just been huddled up in this cave, and obviously for the first few nights with nothing on at all, but then just a rubbish grass skirt. But the wind would whip in. I was cold, but it was just pitch dark as well. Yeah, freezing cold. The wind would whip in. I'd get loads of... I sort of thought, okay, how am I going to get myself warm? Because obviously I had no blankets or anything like that. And so I just thought, like a horse in stables, they have loads of hay, don't they? So I got loads of fistfuls of grass, and I'd try and put grass all over the top of me, but I was still cold. And then after, I think it was 13 days, getting that fire going, just the knowledge that at night I was going to have a little bit of light, and, you know, the morale that a fire gives you, and the warmth at night, and I was just able to huddle up by the fire, and it was just, I was so happy that then the other emotions came straight up with it. Like the happiness was the release valve for, I guess, emotions in general and just feelings to come up. But then immediately there was tears there, and like all of the stuff that I've been shoving down, the fear and the loneliness sort of all came flooding to the surface. I just started crying. But it was it was just so intense. It was impossible to plan for, really. I don't think anyone knows how they're going to react to that sort of isolation and until they do it for themselves.
So making fire is a lot difficult. It's
not that difficult, but I think it was reflective.
But it took you quite long.
I think it was reflective on my mental state. The tree that I ended up using to make the fire, which was called Tangalito, was about as far away as that little fake tree over there, okay. And from my cave. And I'd walked past it 15, 20 times a day since I'd arrived, but I was so in my head and panicky that I just hadn't, I couldn't see the wood for the trees, literally. I couldn't see what I needed in order to get the fire going. And I wasn't an expert at survival at that stage either. I'd walked the length of the Amazon, but that was an expedition. I used a lighter. I'd learned some basics of knowledge of making fire by friction, but I certainly wasn't very good at it. And so my technique was poor. I was too panicky, so I had the wrong wood. And then even making something like that into a fire kit without a knife, people don't think, well, how are you going to carve it? How are you've got to make you've got to get it to the right shape. You've got to split the wood. You've got to carve the hole out. You've got to carve a little ember notch where all the powder builds up so that I just had seashells. So it took 3 days or something just to carve the thing, just sitting there going backwards and forwards, so braiding it rather than cutting it because I didn't have a knife. So yeah, it just takes longer. And then just the sheer payoff, the amazing payoff of having a fire going. And then obviously I kept that going for the next 40 days, over 40 days. Yeah.
Did you read the book Robinson Crusoe before you went onto the island?
I knew the story, but I didn't reread that. I didn't watch the film with Tom Hanks, Castaway.
Castaway.
Yeah, so neither that nor Robinson Crusoe. But I guess the thing that I found refreshing about that challenge for television is that they didn't script it beforehand. Literally, those 60 days, whatever I needed to do to survive was what I did. And that it certainly doesn't happen in TV anymore. It's far more, because we had the luxury of 60 days, they just went, whatever happens, happens, and we'll make a TV program out of it, which was incredibly refreshing. But no, normally now we'll be filming in a much more concentrated period of time, so you have to go, right, okay, well, there's a part where you're going to have to make a fire, there's a part where you're going to have to make a shelter, and I kind of know in my head what I'm going to have to do on the different days.
How did you mark time, one day 2 days, 3 days?
I think there was a calendar on the screen of the camera.
Oh, okay.
and a clock, actually. I'd like do this. Have you seen the film Crocodile Dundee?
Yes.
Yeah, you know the bit where he looks at Wally's watch and then he looks at the sky and goes, I think it's about 2:10 or whatever. So I would do exactly the same thing with the camera screen. I'd look at the camera and I'd go, judging where the sun is, I think it's about 4:00 in the afternoon. Just reading the time off the camera.
I forgot you had a camera with you. Okay.
Obviously, there was no one to talk to. But then as soon as I'd flip that screen out and I could see my own face, sometimes I would be really sad and I'd want to convey sadness because that's what I was feeling. I'd flip the screen out and I'd see my face and I'd go, "You're right, mate." And it's like started developing this slightly crazy relationship with myself in the screen because it was the only face that I ever saw. And so in a way, it worked really well because I had no camera crew. There was nobody to share a joke with. I ended up doing it all to the camera. So you've got this very intimate connection to the camera because it was my only vehicle to speak. Mm-hmm. It was the only way I could express myself. And I think that's probably why that ended up being a format that worked.
If you're being filmed all the time, after a certain period of time, maybe 10 days or 2 weeks, you will become really authentic.
I guess. But I think I was really authentic from day one because there was no point being anything else. I guess there was parts of me that, like the needing to put on a grass skirt, that parts of me that I invariably didn't want to show. And maybe part of the panic was initially I need to come across as competent. I need to look competent. This is my survival show. I need to get a fire going. And part of the elation of getting a fire going was, well, that's good because it would be a bit of a rubbish survival experiment if 60 days went past and I wasn't able to get a fire going. So part of it was this sort of pressure I built on myself in order to look a certain way, in order to be perceived a certain way.
There is a possibility. What if you just couldn't get that fire?
Not at all, exactly. I know, and that was a distinct possibility that was going to happen as well.
Bomber, what would you do then?
That would have just been the story. He had to live like an animal for the entire time.
That means you had to eat raw food for the entire duration of 60 days, like raw fish, all that kind of stuff?
Well, if I hadn't have got a fire going, yeah, I would have had to do, yeah. But I did, obviously, on day 13 or whatever, I got the fire going and therefore I was able. But the first 13 days, I was eating mostly snails and I was probably vomiting more than I was defecating because of the raw snails and all the bacteria or the parasites or whatever it was that was in them.
Tom Hanks got very thin for that role.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? Yeah.
Did you lose lots of weight at the very end? Started
about 94 kilograms, came off about 76, so like 18 kilograms.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I've never been that weight since, again, and developed quite a eating almost disorder, obsession with food. I think because I obsessed over food for such a long period of time, and it was so important, and it was obviously I didn't have any for most of it. I became a little bit out of control. Like I put that weight on maybe 3 weeks after I got back, because I would literally middle of the night wake up, go and have a bowl of cereal and then another bowl of cereal. Every coffee shop I went into, I'm going to have a flapjack and I'm going to have this, and I was just stuffing my face. And I think that's natural. I think anybody that goes through that period of starvation, it's kind of like this sort of instinct to then just refeed. But it felt very out of control because I kind of liked being lean. I mean, who doesn't like being in good shape? It was as lean as I'd been in my life, but I recognised the sort of dangers there as well when you play around with enjoying being that skinny. It gets into sort of body dysmorphia sort of territory. Yeah.
And you also had an emergency kit just in case you would push that button. So was there ever a moment you thought, okay, I'm going to push.
I used the satellite phone twice. I was ill both times, and I had to call in help. And one they showed in the program, the other one they didn't. I think one of them ended up being trapped wind, but it's like trapped wind can feel like, I felt like I was dying. Like there was this excruciating pain in my stomach. And I was just like, this is television. This isn't worth dying over. I don't know what's wrong with me. And so I called the satellite phone. They came in. The other time, I think I had a series of infections stacked on top of each other, and they gave me loads of antibiotics. Yeah, so twice I called for help. But I mean, I think that's really just indicative of how real the experiment was. You know, we weren't pretending. It wasn't like there was no acting in that at all. It was literally go on the island, you know, and one of the things that can happen is, you know, you get sick, and that's what happened. Yeah.
It's a very long time, 60 days, you know. There got to be maybe a day or two you say, hey, I really enjoy doing this. Was there ever a moment like that?
Yeah, little, very sporadic times. When I completed the shelter, there was a real feeling of satisfaction. I'd built myself a house, I'd thatched it, it was very well done. I mean, it took 12 days to build, but it was bomb-proof, and I knew it wasn't going to let water in. So there was a feeling of satisfaction and sort of happiness then. I guess it was happiness. And when I killed the goat and I cut it up, for those 10 days of eating goat meat, because I made it into sort of goat jerky, was the best 10 days. I think just the food going in and the fats and the proteins were the best 10 days. I think largely my mood was lower because of the calorific intake being lower. But I would remember, like, I'd look at the sunset in the evening and just, so what? You know, I know it was the most beautiful island and the most gorgeous orange sunsets, and I was like, there's no one to share it with, so I don't care.
Exactly. Beautiful scenery can only make someone sadder when you're alone.
I definitely agree with that. And I could see the thing that would be interpreted as beautiful and a nice thing to go and watch at sunset, but it meant nothing to me. I think you're right. It did reinforce the loneliness. Yeah, and I think like it isn't coincidence that I chose to be isolated on a desert island. You know, I clearly chose a challenge that leaned into the issues that I personally had. It was almost like a sort of self-prescribed challenge that was specific to my particular issues. And I think, you know, being alone, being lonely, being rejected from the world was one of my own massive issues. And therefore I think that's why I ended up doing it. I genuinely believe that it was to work through those specific things.
But at that time, I thought you had already passed that passage because you had been recognized, you had your fame.
Because of the lack of harbour to come home to, the lack of integration with people that cared about me, the lack of consolidation of the lessons that I'd learned, I think that it took being naked and marooned on the island to actually develop a true sense of self and a true identity. I think a lot of the lessons from the Amazon were lost because I came home and just got drunk. You know, it was like coming out of an exam and just wiping my brain. I felt like I'd lost all of the benefits. I think with hindsight, looking back on it now, I did become wiser from it, but at the time it felt lost and I still felt unanchored. It was the island that gave me a kind of real inner sense of, no, this is the man that I'm going to become, basically. Mm-hmm.
By the time you got to the island, did you still have money, or you had already lost the money you made?
It's a ridiculous story, but no, I had pretty much spent everything that I'd made.
All of it?
I started dating a multi-billionaire. So
you what?
I started dating a multi-billionaire.
You started dating a multi-billionaire?
Yeah.
Billionaire?
She was more wealthy than the Queen. She was ridiculously wealthy. So money was no object at that time. And we were like flying on private jets and all sorts of things. That was a whole nother story. But you know, the positives of being on TV.
My eyes are like that.
Yeah, no, it was a funny story that she wrote to me and asked me.
Well, is she someone I know? Because if she's a billionaire, the name I might have heard of. Is she famous?
I've never talked about it in the press before, so I'm not sure I should. In England, they were a well-known family.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, she was ridiculously wealthy, and I get life is all about lessons, isn't it? And if ever I needed a lesson on uber wealth doesn't make you happy, that was one of them. For all the yachts and houses in the world. There was just so much insecurity that went hand in hand with that level of wealth. Everybody wanted a piece of them, and there was so much mistrust as well. That it was a very, very healthy lesson for me that there's a certain level of wealth that is wholesome to try and achieve, I think. But then after a certain level, it becomes both difficult to manage and, I don't know, you get caught in the whole sort of greed, grabbiness of wealth, I think.
Honestly, did you ever wish that you could marry her? You know, in Chinese we say 嫁入豪门, which means marry into super wealthy family. But there's a price to pay if you ever marry into a super wealthy family. That means you have to live in a very closed off kind of life, you know, sheltered, very luxurious, but you don't have any connection with the outside world whatsoever.
It was very simple things that I didn't actually like. Like in the house that we lived in, I never had to pick up my pants off the floor. Like I would take my trousers off, and like by the next day, somebody had tied them away, somebody had washed them, somebody had folded them, put them in a drawer. Like I'd never changed a plug socket, I never changed a fuse. I didn't even know where these things were kept.
People leave rose petals.
Almost,
okay.
Yeah. I didn't like the detachedness from, I don't know, it felt like, and also my wages, although they were higher than I'd ever earned in my life before, were meaningless, insignificant in my circumstances. So that, again, when you're trying to forge your way in life as a man, feeling like a sort of provider, stereotypically as a male, like it was a drop in the ocean to the situation that I'd found myself in.
So, as a man, your pride got hurt a little bit?
I think not enough for it not to be an incredibly alluring situation. But I think, do you know what? The thing that surprised me was that it was as alluring as it was. I'd never considered myself a materialistic human being. And yet that level of wealth, you know, I mean, you're essentially, you have no worries forever. You know, it's just such a level of wealth, and anything can be bought. As I said, there were lessons that came with that, you know, and not necessarily, they say money doesn't buy happiness. And I think you've got to experience wealth to understand that. Like, they weren't happier human beings than the friends that I have now. We're still paying off debts, my wife and I now, from the COVID period where we had to take loans out because we weren't working. But life's real. They've done studies, haven't they, on the sort of blue zone areas of the world, and a lot of the reason that people live to become centurions, is it called, where you live to 100, is diet. But the primary one, above diet, above exercise, is having meaning in life. And I think as soon as you've got that much money, it's like, there's no meaning in life. You can do anything. You can literally do anything you want. And I think there's nothing satisfying about that for me. I find it very difficult, yeah.
Yeah. Money is good, but too much money, no.
No.
Well, to me, I think too much money is, well, evil is too harsh a word, but it's dangerous.
Dangerous. I would agree with that.
It's dangerous.
I would agree with that. I quite liked, somebody said to me, if you're a very good human being, it will just exaggerate your qualities. You will become even more good. But if you're a bit of a bad human being, or a bit jealous, or a bit this, it will just accentuate those negative qualities as well. And I think from what I've seen, it seems to be true.
Nobody can remain sane with that kind of fortune. So then what happened? You left that relationship by yourself, or what?
I've never spoken about that relationship before, but it wasn't as healthy as it could have been. I think I didn't quite fit into that world. I'm not from money. I don't sort of sit comfortably in very expensive clothes and situations, and so yeah, we separated, and I moved into a small 2-bedroom flat in South London. A period in my life where I was more solid. At that point, I'd got more of an idea of who I was. I'd got a career now of making regular TV programs, because Naked and Marooned, the island experience, spilled into another series for Discovery Channel. And so, I don't know, things were going right in life, and therefore I think Laura, my wife, came along at that point because the energy was right. I think, I was ready finally to receive somebody who wanted to marry me.
Come to think of it, a 2-bedroom apartment in London.
Yeah.
It's not bad at all.
No, it was great. I'm very, very grateful for the fortune that I've had in terms of, I essentially go camping and have fun and do things that kids do and roll around in the mud and build houses out of trees and get paid for it and get paid well. And it's given us the ability to travel the world. It's given us the ability to live in Costa Rica where we do now, which isn't cheap actually. And so I'm very, very, very grateful for that. And so, yeah, we still own a nice house in England, which we are going to sell this coming year. But I am extraordinarily grateful for...
Why do you want to sell your house in London?
The house is in Leicestershire that we've still got. It's got a mortgage on it, but the rent doesn't cover the mortgage. So I could put it into a better investment and earn money off it. So yeah, I'm subsidising that house by sending money back to England every month. So it doesn't make sense.
Why did you move to Costa Rica in the first place?
Good question. I think I became increasingly aware that I think my wife and I are kind of mavericks. We live a little bit, we're quite scruffy, we're quite unorganized, we're quite anti-establishment. And the place that we ended up buying and living in was so middle class, so middle England, so conservative. We weren't necessarily welcomed by the village that we moved into, and we wanted to set up this glamping business because we'd bought this big old house, and so we started changing things and putting in glamping units, and we got all sorts of complaints by the village. And anyway, I think we didn't like being judged. We didn't like the sort of part of Britain which compares themselves to you all the time and is quite judgy and quite staid as well. We wanted to just live our lives and be more free spirits. And Costa Rica it's almost like going back in time. This place is ridiculous for all the cameras that it has everywhere, but there's not a camera in Costa Rica. I think there's 3 sets of traffic lights in the whole country. We never wear seatbelts. The kids don't wear helmets on their bikes. It's just, you can do whatever you like and no one's watching you. No one cares. And there's a freedom in that I absolutely love. And the society isn't judgmental. You can do what you like. We drive a 21-year-old car and a 14-year-old car. So they're old, they break down. But when they break down, we've got friends that will give us a lift and help take the kids to school. And I like the fact that we've stepped outside of the rat race. I like the fact that we're not buying the latest flat screen TV or the latest car or the latest this, that and the other. And actually that the kids are protected from that whole sort of competitiveness and modern world of things like social media and gaming and stuff like that, because again, a lot of that you just don't see it out in Costa Rica. So I think it's been a lifestyle thing more than anything. I just really wanted to. And I think also when we bought what is still quite a big house in Leicestershire, I was still in the throes of my former relationship with this multi-billionaire, and we bought a house that was too big. And somebody said to me a quote a couple of years ago, which was, "The more you own, the more it owns you." And it really resonated with me. And I was like, do you know what? That's so true. We thought that this big house would make us happy, and that suddenly everyone would like us because we're in the biggest house in the village. And actually it was just responsibilities and obviously bills financially, and therefore pressure. And actually, weirdly, having the biggest house in the village doesn't make people like you. If anything, it kind of segregates you a little bit. Oh, the Stafford's in their big fancy house. And so we just thought, do you know what? Let's experiment with a simpler life, a more wholesome life. And so we moved to, the place that we're about to move into, actually we're moving house, is 3 bedrooms, but it's small. There's 6 of us now. I've got 4 kids. it's small, and it's humble, and it's, I don't know, I think we're all happier, if I'm honest, because we're not playing that game. Yeah, I think there's something about the Western world, social media, the influences of capitalism that isn't necessarily wholesome for bringing up kids. And I think where we live is more wholesome. Not perfect, but better.
And your wife, Laura, is quite amazing. She once cycled across South America with no money at all.
Yeah, she did. I think that's obviously what brought us together. She was cycling across South America, and she wanted some advice from me because I've obviously spent a fair bit of time there, and got in contact, and we met up in a pub in London and didn't speak about expeditions at all for the entire time we met. And I think we were in the pub for about 11 hours. We were there from late morning until the final closing hours, and we just got on like a house on fire. And she's a lot younger than me, but we just clicked. And we were engaged she moved in within 3 weeks. We were engaged within 3 months, and then we were married within a year. And then we had our first kid a year later. But we've been married 10 years now. So it's, I think because I was older and I hadn't got married younger in my life, and I'm grateful I hadn't got married or had kids with any past relationships, it allowed me the confidence to know that I was walking into this with my eyes open, that I was old enough and ugly enough to recognize that, one, it was real love, and two, that I could make it work. You know, I was stable enough to make it work.
Well, what made her decide to sort of step away for a while from the expedition world to focus on her family, to raise kids?
It had always been her plan. She always wanted to have kids early and then have a career afterwards, which was lucky for me because I was getting older and I wanted to have a family immediately. And I think we just, from being older, I gave her the stability financially to be able to have kids younger, which was what she wanted. And we've got a 1.5-year-old is our youngest at the moment, and Laura's now in the position where she's studying to be an Ayurvedic practitioner, which is sort of Indian healing sort of medicine through food, but similar to a lot of Chinese medicine actually. And she's keen to do that. That's a way of keeping her brain alive while she's still breastfeeding and doing all of the kid stuff. But yeah, and she's now early 30s and obviously has the capacity to then rekindle her career in whichever way she wants to. And I'm not sure it will be in expeditions. Okay. I think she's matured a lot by having 4 kids. And again, you know, coming back to that whole concept of that sort of desire to go on expeditions is somewhat, I need people to look at me and see how impressive I am in this field and see what I've done. That need in her has matured as well. Yeah.
And all your kids, they were born in Costa Rica?
No, 3 of them were born in England, and then the most recent one was born in Costa Rica.
Okay. And your oldest boy, his name
Ranulph, yeah.
Ranulph was named after the famous expeditioner.
Explorer, yeah. He was. Ranulph Fiennes, unfortunately, he's got Parkinson's disease, so he's going downhill rapidly in terms of his health. But Ranulph Fiennes he was described by Guinness Book of Records as the world's greatest living explorer. But yeah, we just thought it would be fun to call our boy Ranulph.
And he's related to Ralph Fiennes, the famous actor?
Yeah, cousin. They're a very eccentric family. The Fiennes from British aristocracy. They're all baronets, I think. So he's
Sir or baronet? Yeah,
I think he's a baronet. When I got back from walking the Amazon, Ranulph Fiennes made me a trustee of their trust that gave grants out to young expedition members. So I've ended up spending quite a lot of time with him, and he's a really inspiring man. But unfortunately, he is now racked with Parkinson's disease. So he's 70, 78, 79, something like that. So he's getting on now. But he was giving talks, but he said he's had to stop because he's shaking all the time.
And you once said that you think children should be raised in managed risk. Kids should be taking risks, but only to a certain degree.
The tendency is to keep your kids as safe as possible. And I think it's a very natural tendency. We all want to protect our children because they're the most important beings in our life, and we are responsible for them. But you can take that to the extreme. Probably the safest thing you can do for your children is to put them in front of the TV all day long, and so they won't leave the front room, and they're completely safe. But they're not going to evolve as human beings, I don't think. So I do think it's important to not just give them outdoor play, but also add an element of risk. And I think when you add risk, you're kind of upping the stakes. There's more for them to learn, I think. But I'm not talking about, skydiving at the age of 8 or anything like that. But I guess I am talking about just allowing them to make decisions for themselves. So if they're going to climb up something and it's relatively high, and if they fell off, they might break a leg, but they'd survive. I'd probably let them do it because
you have a big heart.
No, but I want them to grow into human beings that are robust, but also are evolving in the right way. I don't want to overprotect and mollycoddle and then stunt their development, I guess. That's why I think it's important. Yeah.
So do you consciously want at least one of your kids, or maybe two of them, to become who you are right now? To go into the wilderness, to be a survivalist?
No, I think this for me has been a vehicle that has worked well, but I don't think it's a necessary path for them. I think the risk thing with the kids is more because I want them to evolve as human beings. And I think this has been my vehicle to evolve as a human being, to develop more confidence, to build my moral compass, all of the things that we've talked about. And whichever is their vehicle for that is absolutely fine. I'd like them to be humble. I'd like them to be happy. Same as most parents, but I don't want them to be. There's a few things that are really on my negative list. Entitled is I think the worst thing in the world, And I'd like, even if we do end up leaving money, even if we manage to save some money by the time we die, and I don't want them to know that they're going to inherit any money. I want them to think that they're going to have to fend for themselves for their whole life. I think that's super important. Even if that is the one thing that I'm not honest about with my children, is probably going to be, you're going to inherit nothing. You need to work hard and you need to make money, because I think it's so debilitating for children to know that they're going to be fine because they're going to inherit lots of money. I think that's terrible. So yeah, they don't have to be explorers. It'd be kind of cool if they were. Rand's appropriately named, but it's probably more likely to be my eldest daughter, Molly, who's 5. She's got the sort of presence of personality. My son's, he's quite sensitive, actually. He's easily upset. I think a lot of kids being born at the moment are quite hypersensitive, aren't they? And he does show those sort of qualities. But again, as soon as you're a dad, you sort of think, it would be great before you have kids, you go, I'd quite like them to be like that. But as soon as they are who they are, you just love them for who they are, don't you? It's like, wouldn't want any of them to be different than how they are, yeah. When
they reach the age that they should go to elementary school, then maybe that's the time you should move back to Britain. Possible,
or not, I think, in the UK, in terms of teenage mental health, in terms of social media, in terms of attitudes to all sorts of things. It might be a little bubble, but I think when the kids are so impressionable, it's quite nice to be able to afford to keep them in a little bubble, so that their initial years aren't, as I said, not mollycoddled, not cushioned so much that they're not making mistakes, but also not exposed to the really negative things that are causing young people to have real insecurity problems.
That's something I want to talk to you about, because people might have this misconception about you. We think you sort of float above the society. I'd like to know if we share the certain kind of so-called collective memory. Like just now you said you're not very satisfied about things, how things are going on in Britain right now. So I'd like to know if you are against or pro-Brexit. And where were you when certain big things happened?
I think it's all too easy, isn't it, when things are difficult to blame other people. And in fact, we've made our position so difficult from an economic perspective now. We were in such a clever system in terms of taxes and trade and everything like that was so complementary to us and that benefited us so much. And we've now gone into a far worse one where we were trading with people far further away from us in less advantageous tax positions.
Okay. Oh, no. So where were you when the Queen passed away?
I know where I was when Princess Diana passed
okay.
away.
where were you when Princess Diana passed away?
I was at one of my best friend's houses in Leicester, and I remember that I was about 19 years old, and that was the one that hit everyone. Was Princess Diana dying. I think because of how dramatic the whole thing was as well. It became this almost soap opera unfolding on the television.
And I did the live coverage of her funeral in Hong Kong.
Princess Diana?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. So that hit you pretty hard.
There was almost a mass hysteria around Princess Diana dying. Like, I thought she was a good lady. Of all of the royals, she had a refreshing attitude, but she was still a very privileged lady who went to lunches and did charitable work. You know, I mean, she wasn't a saint, but yeah, no, it was a impactful time. You know, I remember when the planes hit the Twin Towers. I remember that. You know, there's certain times in history, and Princess Diana dying was one of those.
Okay. Yeah. So do you like Meghan and Harry?
I don't follow the news at all at the moment. I've literally deleted all the apps off my phone. I don't feel like what I do for my job requires me to be up to date with things. So I don't really know how they're behaving at the moment. I don't really know the life they're leading. I do think they have every right in the world to carve their own way in life. And I recognise the establishment in Britain as being quite, you know, that stuffy environment is almost the same stuffy, judgmental environment that I was escaping from in Middle England. And therefore I can understand it from Harry's perspective. I don't know, there's an element of kind of modern day oversharing in all of it, and it somehow feels not very royal, but then again, it's no different than this kind of emotional oversharing that I've made a career out of. So yeah, I do like Harry. I will pass judgment on Meghan. I don't know enough about her to say anything, but I think Prince Harry, from the people that I know that know him well, would have made a good SAS officer, and he's a funny guy, and he's a kind guy, and I think there's a real authenticity about him. So I
feel certain sympathy for them because I translated his biography into Chinese. Yeah.
Okay.
He suffered a lot.
Right.
Because he lost his mother at very young and tender age.
Yeah,
that was very traumatic for him.
Yeah.
And I watched the preview of your new documentary, Rite of Passage.
Thank you.
Very entertaining. I especially like the two destinations I like most. One is Shaolin Temple. The other is you went to Africa.
Well, yeah,
where the tribe, they speak a very interesting kind of language.
The clicky language.
Yes.
Yeah. That was the honey, the wild honey.
That was in Kenya or
in Tanzania.
Tanzania. Because my dad, he passed away. He spent several years in Tanzania.
Did he?
Yeah, he spoke their language. Well, one of their languages, Swahili.
Okay. This was Hadza.
Hadza.
Yeah, I mean, they were traditionally a nomadic tribe, and they the rite of passage that I was going there to take part in was they have to prove their strength by going and stealing wild honey from these African bees' nests. It was cool. I've never met a more happy people in my life. They were just so happy. They literally, none of them had mobile phones. None of them had possessions at all. Some of them had kids. Some of them had wives. They had nothing to feed their family until they went out hunting. And yet there was a kind of freedom in that, in not having possessions that seemed to allow them not to worry. You'd think that you'd need to have a stock of food to allow you to relax in order to be a father and a husband. But they were so carefree. It was quite beautiful. And there seemed to be an almost inverse relationship to possessions in terms of how happy they were, because they had nothing. I have never seen a tribe with as little possessions, just the clothes they were wearing on their back. And I've also just never cried with laughter quite as much as I did with them, because they were just brilliant and entertaining.
Yeah. They're really free.
Yeah, really free.
You know, and they really put things into perspective for us.
Yeah, no, the whole series was a fascinating one to film, and kind of appropriate at this time. I'm turning 50 in
2 weeks.
Yeah, about 2 weeks' time. And it does feel like a milestone for me. I don't want to waste the next part of my career. I really want to, you know, we were saying today how quite often when I come to China, like the content that we end up creating is like eating something weird. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be the famous guy who just eats something weird. There's something inherently pointless about that. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, oh, well done, Ed's eating something weird again. I'd like, if I have got any sort of influence, I'd like to be able to do something with my life. And I think Rite of Passage is taking the kind of adventurous stuff that I've done and looking at challenges that young people can do that will really allow them to grow. And so if we have got a crisis of meaning in our life at the moment, if we have got huge mental health problems, if we have got people who are really struggling with isolation issues and stuff like that and confidence issues, then I really like to be able to push things that can help with that and can combat. And I think Rite of Passage is definitely one of those. And I've started writing a book to complement the series and want to run courses as well for young people so that they can get the benefits out of doing something inherently natural that they wouldn't normally do in their normal everyday lives, that's going to really help them when they go back to their everyday lives.
We Chinese believe that at 40, you are supposed to have no doubts. You know, you will have no doubts.
Yeah.
And at 50, you will know the mandate of heaven.
Right.
In general, you will know life. But to be honest with you, because I've already passed 50, I don't think it's quite true. Maybe I'm getting there. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But how do you feel about, you know, you're reaching the milestone of 50?
It does feel like a milestone, but I don't want the next 10 years to be about me. I want this to be the tipping point where I start giving back to the world, I guess. And I think I've got a platform to be able to do that. And so I'd really like to be able to be part of the solution, I guess. I'm not saying that I'm going to change the world, but I would like to be a positive influence on it.
Mm-hmm. Also, I really enjoy the episode where I stayed at the Shaolin Temple. And I find something really, really, really interesting. You know, there's this one scene you stay in one of the monks' dorm.
Yeah.
And to me, that room looks clean and very properly equipped with air conditioning and everything. And then you found the mattress was so thin. So you complain a little bit into the camera and you put two mattresses together. Yeah. And then I thought to myself, gee, this guy, you know, he could walk the entire length of Amazon and he could stay 60 days on that island naked. And now he couldn't bear one thing mattress. What happened? What happened here?
Do you know what?
So maybe...
You might have tapped into something there.
Okay.
I think there is a part of me, as I have started to understand my own needs and wants in life, that I think I'm a little bit less tough than I was. I think back in the day, when it was all about fiercely trying to prove myself, I would tolerate a lot of things, and I would discomfort being one of those things. I was very happy because it's worth it, because I'm going to get there in the end. I'm going to prove how strong I am. I'm going to prove how tough I am. When that dissipates, and it's good that it's dissipated, because I don't think it's healthy for a 50-year-old to need to prove himself all the time. Obviously, there's more important things in life. However, it does mean that you kind of want the nice things as well. The degree to which you're prepared to suffer goes as well. You're like, I don't want to sleep on a hard mattress. I want to sleep on a nice mattress. And I don't think there's anything wrong with caring for yourself either, you know.
I have two explanations for that.
Go on.
One is that I think to you, going into the wilderness is work. Mm-hmm. And this, when you're back in so-called civilized world, this is life.
Yeah.
And that's the first explanation. The second one is, I think maybe we will automatically change into different modes of tolerance when we're in different environments.
Yeah, I agree. And also, if you've got a really thin mattress and you know there's 2 beds in your room, of course you're going to get the other mattress and put it on top, aren't you? I mean, that's just practical common sense, no?
So have you ever mastered any kung fu after you stay in the Shaolin temple?
I was terrible. I think if this series did do anything, it certainly wasn't showing how capable I am. It was the most humbling series. Like I had to run across the back of bulls as well in Ethiopia, and I couldn't even get up onto the top of the bulls. So I'm running at full pace trying to jump up onto these bulls and end up just colliding with these bulls, and just the tribal members rolling around on the floor crying with laughter at me, and just how unfit and unagile I was. And the same with Shaolin Temple. I mean, like, there's this horse stance, which is kind of the basis of the whole kung fu routines and stuff. I couldn't even bend down into this horse stance. I was so inflexible. And so I think it was humbling. The whole thing was humbling. I also recognized I didn't really like being told what to do by the kung fu master. He was quite an angry master, and he couldn't remember my name, so he would clap to get my attention, and the hairs on the back of my neck would go up, and I thought, okay, it's interesting that you're reacting to this, Ed. You've clearly got something that you need to let go of.
So after rite of passage, do you think you've really, finally, you've been there, I'm a grown-up man because I've gone through this rite of passage?
I do feel in a good place now. I have to admit, at the beginning of this year, I gave up smoking. And it's something probably people didn't know about me because I don't smoke on camera.
You were a heavy smoker?
I was quite a heavy smoker, yeah. And I also drank quite a lot. And I recognised that when I took it all away, I couldn't really sit on my balcony and be relaxed. I was kind of jumpy and jittery. And I thought, this is odd. I don't like this. I have learned lots of lessons in my life. I've got a beautiful family now. I've got a life in Costa Rica. Why can't I just sit and relax? And I thought it would go with once I weaned myself off the cigarettes, but it didn't. A month later, 2 months later, I was still like that. So I ended up doing a darkness retreat. Have you heard of darkness retreats?
No.
So it's basically you get locked in this bunker. I went to America to do it in Oregon, just north of California, and they've carved these big caves in the side of the hill, and then they shut you in, and you get given food through a hatch 3 times a day. But
I got all claustrophobic.
Yeah, it's pitch dark.
Oh no, I can't stand it.
It was my 50th birthday present to myself. And I just with the pure aim, I want to be able to sit with myself on my balcony and be peaceful and relaxed. And it was a real final confrontation, sort of my own little rite of passage without the cameras being there. And I didn't film it or do social media or anything. And it was the most beautiful experience, actually. And it literally is healing from the baby wounds of, like, it's not safe to feel fear and loneliness. And I'd been suppressing these emotions. And what I realized in that darkness is that you have to have space for all your real emotions. You have to have, the moment I said, look, loneliness, you can come in. This sounds quite woo-woo, I guess, but I envisaged this like dining room table inside me. And I was like, fear, you're allowed to come in and have a seat at the table. You can come and sit down. And like loneliness, you can come and sit down as well. And in creating that space, suddenly all this tension, all of this sort of resisting that I'd been doing for years and suppressing just lifted. And I started crying, but sobbing. And I actually think that's been one of the most beautiful things that's happened to me this year was going through that. And then like, I can now sit on the balcony and just smile and go, like, I don't need a beer. I don't need a cigarette. I don't need to pick my phone up and anxiously check anything. And I think it's just that simple act of just allowing all of everything that's going on internally to be exactly how it is, and not chasing after happiness or joy, but equally not pushing the supposedly negative emotions away. It might be something that most people don't need to learn because they've never picked up this sort of habit as a young person. But I think quite a lot of people do, don't they? They chase certain states and they push away others. For me, it was a big epiphany. That's been my Yeah, a nice little 50th birthday present to myself.
How long do you need to be in the darkness at one time?
It wasn't long. It was 4 nights, so 3 full days. You go in on the evening, stay overnight, then you got 3 full days in darkness, and then come out on the 5th day, I guess.
Yeah. 3 days?
4 nights, 3 days, yeah.
And you were not supposed to leave?
No.
I can't do that.
Yeah,
I was thinking about like maybe 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes top.
The interesting thing was fight or flight kicked in immediately. Like immediately I was like, this isn't going to be a difficult thing to do because, you know, it's no different than the kids going to bed and turning the lights out. It's like, and yet it was different. I mean, it was so dark that you could not see your hand there. Like if you like wave your hand around, no, you couldn't see anything. And something about the length of time in the dark, and especially when it got light the next morning and you're still in the dark, sent me into fight or flight. But part of the learning experience was holding my own hand through that. So feeling the fear that goes hand in hand with this inherent sort of fear of the dark. And I think it's natural to be afraid of the dark because you can't see the dangers. So I think the body naturally goes into this state. But it was then being kind to myself and managing these emotions that actually enabled me to learn something from it, because I think the old me would have just toughed it out and endured it and gone, oh, I'll be fine. But I was actually like, no, okay, I can feel that fear. You're welcome. You can come and have a sit at the table. And when you're not resisting all of these things, they kind of seem to just naturally lift anyway. And so I then wasn't scared of the dark, but I'd actually worked through it rather than just toughed it out. And I think everything that I've done prior to that has just been toughing it out. So it did feel like a big step forward.
You know, the pattern I see from all this is that from time to time, you're going to need some extreme actions to make sure that you can live a very ordinary, day-to-day life like we do. But the good thing is the intensity is getting less and less, or lower and lower.
Yeah, and I genuinely don't feel like I don't really need to do anymore. I have a friend who I told about that story about the darkness retreat, and he goes, Ed, I've always loved you, and I just wish you'd stop thinking that you need to improve yourself all the time, He's just like, just stop. You're fine. I love you. And I was like, I can now, but I didn't want to be. I mean, when I couldn't sit comfortably with myself on the balcony, I was also, I was very short with the kids. Like it was, it's the kind of behavior in a state that knocks on into the people around you. And so I didn't feel like I was being the best dad that I possibly could be. And I think, that's super important to me. So I think I don't want to be a navel gazer. I don't want to be forever internally evaluating myself. But I think there is it's not a big ask, is it, to be able to sit on your balcony and be happy or be at peace. Not even be happy, but be at peace. And so I am pleased that I've gone down this journey. I do think there's a healthy way of not forever chasing being better or being stronger or being tougher, but just being at peace, being not the best version of you, but the version of you that you want to be in order to be supportive of those around you, I guess. Yeah.
I think you will be amazed how many fans you have here in China. I've asked almost all of my male friends, I asked them, do you know Ed? They say, De Ye, of course. He's cool. Why do you think people like to watch survival shows so much?
I think it's real. Even though it's not, even though it's fabricated, even though we're setting up survival experiments essentially, and it's like, okay, where are we going to survive this time? Okay, but it's tapping into a kind of primal existence whereby things really matter. Like if in our everyday life, like if we want water, you just turn the tap on and you get water. And if we want food, you just open the fridge or go to the store. And I think those immediate needs being met take away some of the essence of what it's like to really live. And I think the survival shows just go straight back into that, don't they? That this is what life would have been like if you didn't have a tap and if you didn't have this. And I think it's also like, I'm not really that into the survival techniques. That's why I still struggle to get a fire going and stuff like that. I'm not a geek in that kind of respect. I do think, however, the way you handle things or how you manage the stresses that go hand in hand with survival scenarios is very translatable to everyday life. It's not, I think for me, it's a little hyper intense sort of mirror to stresses that you'd have in life.
The more I know about you, the more I think it's really nice to know that you have this global mindset, so to speak, which is really nice, I think. And also, I have to compliment on you about one thing, that is you don't have this really annoying Western gaze on this exotic cultures.
What is that, sorry?
Superiority.
Oh, really?
You know,
okay.
that kind of thing.
No, I mean...
It's like, oh, it's so cute. That kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, I do know what you mean. I don't, well, just because I don't feel superior. So, I mean, I just... no, I mean, because I'm not superior. I mean, that's not a deliberate thing. That's just me being me.
A lot of the explorers, they were quite ahead of their time, like David Livingstone.
Okay.
It's one of your idols, sort of, right? He was very ahead of his time because he was against slave trade at that time, which was marvelous, I think.
I'm not saying I'm ahead of my time, but I don't know. I do think in a world of stereotypical masculinity, I guess I do take pride in having a bit of emotional maturity. I don't mind admitting vulnerability. I think, there's a lot of my colleagues who who wouldn't share the same degree of sort of stories that I share about the things that I haven't done well. From a personal perspective, I don't feel the need to hide it. I think the moment you hide it, you're only putting part of yourself forward, so you're kind of not really being yourself. And I think there's value to everyone recognizing the sort of realities and difficulties of life. So thank you for the compliment, but I don't think I'm massively forward thinking.
Well, progressive may be the word.
Progressive.
Do you know a very famous story about David Livingstone? No. He went missing for a very long time later in his life when he was in Africa. And that led one of the very first news-driven expedition in the world. And then later he was found by one of the very important American journalists at that time. I forgot his name. Yeah. So when the two met, the very famous line was, Dr. Livingstone, I presume?
Yeah.
It was like a movie. Yeah. That was like a movie's line.
There was a journalist who came in to walk with me in the Amazon, and he literally walked up to me and went, Mr. Stafford, I presume? And I thought that was quite a nice little line. That line is absolutely legendary. I do. It is quite nice to be in that world of explorations, and probably the biggest compliment that the expedition got was Sir Ranulph Fiennes saying it was up there with the great expeditions of the past. And at the end of the day, it was just walking with a rucksack on. There was no real, I'm not a skilled climber. I've not mastered these amazing feats of, technical things. I just walked with a backpack on. I mean, it was
like Forrest Gump.
Exactly.
You just walk.
It's a good comparison. Yeah, it's a good comparison. Yeah, but I mean, I just walk with a rucksack on. But I guess it's a compliment. I guess it's just sticking power. That's why people, I guess, if they were impressed, it's not giving up, maybe. But it's all a big compliment. It is a bit of an ego boost. But I think the healthy way to take it is that it's been an amazing platform to me to have a really fascinating life off the back of. Yeah.
Do you secretly hope that in the future you might be written into history like David Livingstone and George Mallory?
No, genuinely not. I think my ego, the need to be remembered, is so futile and just unnecessary. I think, people come and go. I'm so insignificant in compared to, well, we all are. We're all just so insignificant. And I think there's something ugly about even needing to be remembered. It's like, why do you need to be special? Why do you need to stand
vulgar, right?
Yeah, it is almost vulgar. I totally agree. The shift that occurs when you do become a parent as well. It's like, I want my kids to be wholesome and happy and humble. Don't care whether I'm remembered at all. No. It's not what matters, is it? Once you find that moral compass, once you find that sense of self, that's enough. You don't need the recognition anymore.
Now you have this training camps for young kids. So what's this core value like to pass on to the young generation, to make them the very proper, good explorer, adventurer?
I think it starts with building up resilience. Probably the core sort of theme that runs through all of the different camps and activities and stuff is perseverance, is resilience, is having to endure a certain amount of hardship. And I think invariably young people don't have that much hardship in their lives. Yeah. Too much is handled on a plate. Everyone's too soft. And I'm not trying to train people to be super tough, but I think that is where people will start building up a certain amount of resilience that then is translatable into life, so that they won't have problems in terms of getting a job. They'll be able to hold a job down. They'll be able to have the responsibility that they need in order to not let people down. It's those sort of key fundamental character assets. So it isn't training the next generation of soldiers or the next generation of explorers. It's nothing about that. For me, it's always been a vehicle to become a better human. And by that I don't mean a super strong human. I just mean a better human. Yeah.
And now you are famous, globally famous, and you get to work with this big brands, big companies, big platforms. Are you going to be still by yourself, or you're going to be controlled by the capital? It's all very suspicious, the capital.
By money, you mean?
Yes.
By the capital. I'm not free from having to do things for money yet. I mean, because I'm a dad and I'm a provider, and I've got to, pay the school bills, and I've got to put food on the table. And I'd love to get to a stage where I can pick and choose the things that I do. So that, there are projects that I've done in the past that I'm not really that proud of, but I had to take because I had to pay the bills. And, I'm not doing anything that harms anyone. So if the occasional program is made that I don't 100% resonate with, it's not the end of the world, because it's been a job that I've had to take in order to look after my family. I'm not free of that yet. I do have to do certain things for the money, but increasingly I'm pushing things towards things that have impact, that have meaning, and that's certainly the way I want to go. I don't like being beholden to a big corporate firm with profit as the key thing on their agenda, but I still think that, I've been very lucky in terms of the partnership that we've got with Billy and Discovery, that they've enabled me to make stuff within a profit-making company that I think does potentially have the impact to change how people think and to give people inspiration to get out and have adventures and take their own challenges, and therefore I think it's a kind of a win-win. When it's working, the money doesn't get in the way. When it's working, the money is just a nice side effect of doing something fun and hopefully worthwhile.
So if you become very wealthy, so that's when you're going to stop doing what you've been doing?
Would I stop? I don't think. I'd be more selective in the programs that I chose.
So what qualifications do you think an explorer needs to have? Physical strength, stamina, curiosity, what else?
Ability to connect with people is probably one of the biggest ones. I genuinely think it's more important than heroic strength or massive endurance. I think that ability to win people over, and then I guess a flexibility, the ability to think on your feet and adapt, because expeditions never go to plan, and you're always having to change things last minute and be flexible. So I think those two things: communication with people, winning them over, and having that sort of the confidence to be flexible.
Okay. So my viewers, they're very excited to know that I'm going to have this dialogue with you, and they have some questions.
Okay.
Some of them are very interesting, I think.
Okay.
One of the questions is if you could swap your life with anyone, anyone in the world, or even in the history, who would that person be and why? Well, you only get to swap lives for one day.
Okay. For one day?
Yeah, just for one day, which is enough, I think.
Maybe Nelson Mandela. I think somebody like that, you know, especially at the time when he held on to what was right, and there was nobody really influencing him in that direction, and he really chose morals over, you know, and in terms of how he changed in prison. I think he's been a shining example.
People also want to know if there's a possibility someday in my work with Bear. You know, it's like Messi and Ronaldo playing on the same team.
I don't think it's in Bear's interest, if I'm honest. we get on well. I put a post out on social media. This is about 2 years ago now, and I was quite sad, and I was quite sort of, it was a little bit oversharey, but I just decided to do it. And Bear texted me, and he's like, "Do you want to come for coffee?" And I was like, "All right, I'll go for a coffee." So I drove to Wiltshire. It's about 5 hours drive from where I was. He's like, "Where have you come from?" And I was like, "Leicestershire." And he's like, "It's a long way to come for a coffee, isn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah, but you're Bear Grylls." And he's been very kind, but he's astronomically bigger than I am, and in terms of his success globally. And I genuinely, there's been opportunities for us to, for example, he was invited to do First Man Out a million times over, but it isn't in his interest. You know, he doesn't need to sort of entertain the competition to that degree. But that said, on a personal level, he's been so kind, so supportive, always given me a quote for the cover of my book if I need it or something like that. And I remember we were at a party in London, and he was talking to me and Laura, my wife, and I got called away to do a photo shoot or something. And when I came back, like 20 minutes later, I thought Bear would have made his excuses and left, but he was still talking to Laura and asking her questions about her expedition.
That's nice
and
of
stuff.
him. That's very nice of him.
I think he's a decent human being. And she met him again after her expedition, and he remembered everything that she'd said and asked the right questions and stuff. So I think he's definitely a decent human being. I think he does fall into that trap of the difficulties of, you know, Uber fame and Uber wealth, and has to steer himself in a way that is much harder when you get that big. You know, he can. I've got this friend who describes it as the Matrix. You enter the Matrix when you can ask for a helicopter in place of a car, apparently. And this is my friend's analogy. And he said Bear lives in the Matrix because as soon as you live in the Matrix, rather than you being a part of the universe starts revolving around you. And the advice was to not enter the Matrix because you lose touch with reality. But I just think, yeah, as we alluded to earlier, when you are dealing with that level of wealth and power, it's a harder world to navigate. Yeah.
So do you see that your life is going into the next chapter?
For me, that's not the direction I'm going. I would like it to be rewarding, you know, stuff that matters, as we've alluded to before. But I don't need the uber success.
Then what is your ultimate goal, if you have one? You know, something you like to do, somewhere you need to be?
It's much smaller scale than that. It's having more time with my family. It's nurturing them to be decent human beings. It's creating memories with them. I heard a beautiful story yesterday about a millionaire who was right at the top of their game, but he wasn't happy, and he went to a psychologist and he said, I'm just not happy because I spend all of my time away from home and my kids are young, and I want to spend more time with my kids. And the psychiatrist just said, well, just stop doing your work and spend time with your kids. And he took 5 years off and spent 5 years with his kids. And that person's John Lennon. And he actually did that at a point when his career was at its absolute peak.
Yes.
And then he just stopped making music and spent 5 years with his kids. And what a cool thing to do. And then obviously with the assassination, you think even more cool that he didn't spend that, because of the temptation to just make another record or do another tour or, get another however many £1 million would have been so high for John Lennon. But isn't it cool that the one thing that he ended up doing was stopping all of it, even with all those temptations, and spending 5 years nurturing his kids? I thought that was so cool.
And I think that's the time when his fans, or Beatles fans, started accusing his wife for stealing him away from the band.
Possibly.
And the stage.
Yeah, so he's even getting attacked by his fans. Yeah, for doing such a beautiful thing and just spending time with nurturing his kids.
Okay, so after this trip, you're going back home with your family for the holiday season and also for your birthday.
Yeah.
Do you have a birthday wish?
I think, I've been through quite a lot of change this year, but that has an impact on the family. And so I just want to be more of a rock for them in this coming year, so that it's not all about me doing work on myself. It's about being there for them. I think, both in the domestic setting and in my career, it's time to flip it around now and make it less about me.
So maybe one last question. Do you still feel the urge to take on one challenge after another? Do you still feel that pressure and desire?
No. In the same, because the motivation's changed. It's of course I want to keep paying the bills, and I haven't built up a passive income yet to be able to stop work. I need to work, but it's a means to an end now. It's a fun means to an end. I enjoy the challenges. It keeps me on my toes. It's like it keeps me from getting old, I think, because I am still humbled time and time again, especially with programs like Marooned, because you never have all the answers when you go into a survival situation. You've still got to think on your feet, and you're therefore still being humbled and still growing. It's wholesome enough, but I don't. It's not chest beaty. I don't need it in order to develop a identity around it anymore. No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
It's been very inspiring and
Thanks
interesting at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.